When a murder occurs, homicide detectives must explore every possible theory, no matter how remote they may seem. And in this investigation, there were many. Speculation arose about gangs, prostitution, and love triangles, to name but a few. However, only one theory would turn into fact.
Two firefighters told me that over a number of days there'd been backburning operations being conducted along the edge of the national park. They were burning off this particular area alongside the roadway, and as they were doing that, they came across what looked like an old suitcase that someone had dumped from the road. They saw that it was still smouldering from the effects of the fire. They also saw that part of the exterior of the bag had been burned away and some of the items in the bag were also still smouldering. And that's when they went a little bit closer to the suitcase and they saw that there was a plastic bag in there that was in a round shape. It was at that stage that they made the disturbing find of a human skull within that bag.
The case was several metres from the side of the road. It was a fairly steep incline. I proceeded to record that area by way of taking photographs. The skull itself was in one corner of the suitcase within the remains of a white shopping bag. The size of the skull indicated that it was a small child. I had to go down several metres further into the bush to get a view of the case in the road, and doing that I've noticed a second case which was in an area that was unburnt by the fire. Seeing the second case so close to the first case, I considered it would have to be related, although I hoped there wouldn't be a similar finding inside that case as there was in the smaller case.
The two cases were carefully removed and put onto a tarpaulin on the edge of the road for further examination.
The second suitcase was unzipped, and as we began to remove the contents, we immediately saw the remains of an adult female. It was certainly something that was totally unexpected. You know, all of a sudden, we haven't just got the murder of a child, we've got now a double murder. We began to look closer at the deceased, and I saw that there was also a shopping plastic bag around the head, very similar to how we had located the skull in the first suitcase. As we moved down towards the hand area, we saw that her hands had been bound by a twine. A length of that continued to run further down towards the bottom of the corpse and had also bound the feet together so that she was effectively hogtied.
We then went back to the smaller of the two cases and we removed the remainder of the clothing. While we were doing that, we noted that they're all folded as if the bag had been packed.
As these items were being one by one itemised and removed from the suitcase, the crime scene investigator, all of a sudden he's come across this third shopping bag and he's began to lift it out of the suitcase, and it was quite evident that it was something cylindrical and, you know, quite evident, I think even at that stage, that it was a human skull, a third human skull. I remember just looking around and there was just absolute silence. I think everyone was just gobsmacked. Yeah, they couldn't believe that here we already had two deceased persons in these suitcases, and now it appeared that there was going to be a third.
Seeing that the first child in its condition was a little upsetting, but seeing two small children in one suitcase with their ankles bound and plastic bags over the head, for some there was quite upsetting.
7 Nightly News with Chris Barr.
Tonight, bush graves, a police search underway after the discovery of 3 human skulls. Good evening. The discovery of the remains of 3 bodies sparked a major police operation in New South Wales bushland tonight. 3 skulls have been removed for forensic examinations while police check missing persons files.
The gruesome discovery was made near Heaton's Lookout, 11 kilometres south of Cessnock and on the edge of the Wattagan State Forest. The gender and the cause of death are unknown. The bodies could have been at the scene for years.
While the local media speculated that the bodies could be those of several missing women, a post-mortem was being conducted on the female and the 2 small children to determine the cause of death.
Part of the examination included X-raying that identified no obvious signs of trauma, no obvious evidence of gunshot injury or projectiles, either in the remains or in the remains of the suitcases. They looked fairly carefully for evidence of maybe a knife wound, for small nicks and cuts along the edges of bones.
We weren't able to detect any bones broken by the impact of a heavy implement. So they gave up no real evidence as to a cause of death. We then reverted back to the fact that the head of each of the three victims had been encased in a plastic shopping bag, which appeared to have been tied around the neck of each of those three individuals. It was a reasonable assumption that each of the three had been asphyxiated, effectively suffocated, by having plastic bags closed tightly over their heads. When you think of it, a very, very cruel death. We were at a stage of frantically trying to find out who these people were from the little bit of information we had. I was running through my own mind, have we had any mothers and children in the local area go missing that we've been looking for a while? I was unable to think of anything, and equally so the other police that were with me couldn't conjure up any thoughts of something like that having occurred. So we're starting to think, well, are these people being brought here from some other area?
Now we'll move on to the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, where police are carrying out a major search in the Watagan State Forest after the discovery of 3 human skulls. Reporter Richard Lenarduzzi joins us. So they think that it is the bones or the skulls of a woman and 2 children, is that right?
And speculation is rife at the moment as to who the skulls may belong to. I can tell you that Homicide Squad police are sifting through dozens of missing persons records, but they're focusing on the case of a young woman, her son and daughter, who vanished from Sydney's northern suburbs late last year.
10 months earlier, 31-year-old Susan Park, her 3-year-old son Andrew, and daughter Amy, who was only 18 months old, had been reported missing by her sister-in-law, Mina Park. Detectives investigating the triple murder were now hoping she could help them confirm the identity of the 3 and give them any leads to solve the case.
All right, as you are aware, last week the body of a female and 2 children were discovered in the Cessnock area. What I'd like to do is show you some photographs of items that were found with those bodies and see if you can tell me anything about those items. Can you tell me anything about that?
That's Susan's sweater. It's one of her favourites. She wore it many times when we went out. I have many photos of her wearing this.
Do you know if you've seen that particular teddy bear previously?
This teddy bear, my mother, Andrew's grandmother, had bought a white teddy bear about this size for Andrew's birth.
Well, and lastly, I'll show you a photograph of an earring.
I believe I've seen that same earring she wore on the day we went out to shopping. That was about 5 days before she disappeared.
The 2 had remained good friends, even though Mina's brother Nick had been officially separated from Susan for a month at the time she went missing.
How close a relationship did your brother have with his ex-wife and children?
He would go back and see the children every week or every other week. But I don't know whether they were close enough.
When police first began their investigation into Susan and the children's disappearance, which was 10 months before their bodies were found, they had gone to the flat where Susan lived, and her husband, Nick Park, was there.
I asked Mr. Park where Susan and the children were, and Mr. Park told us that they were with their uncle in Queensland.
They actually flew to Brisbane. They're staying with their uncle at the moment. We want to sell everything and start fresh up there.
He was selling the goods in the unit and planned on joining them the following day. At that point, we weren't too concerned. We thought it was quite a reasonable explanation. We thought, well, we'll go back and we'll make some inquiries to find out whether or not that was true.
Will you be here the rest of the day, Mr. Park?
Yeah, sure. I'll be packing all day, so I will be here.
And we had contacted Susan's uncle, and he had no knowledge of her whereabouts and, in fact, hadn't spoken to her for about 6 months. At that time, we thought that it was a bit strange that he would lie to us about something like that. We decided that we would go back. There was no answer at this time. We looked through the window, we were unable to see anybody inside the unit. So we decided we'd do a bit of a canvass of the local units, other residents, to see whether or not they might have any information which could help us.
One neighbour told them that the last time she had seen Susan was 11 days before. Susan had mentioned to her that she and Nick might be getting back together. Nick had left Susan because of another woman, but he now apparently wanted to make amends.
But he never told that there was another woman involved until the last minute, until like September 96, which was a month before they disappeared.
He had told Susan that he was actually working night shifts and staying at a house with a friend, and that was the reason for him not being home of a night.
So Susan had no idea that Nick had a new girlfriend, even though he'd been going out with her for some 11 months?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. I'm aware that Susan allegedly tried to take her own life in around September last year.
Yes.
Is that around the same time as she learned that Nick had a new girlfriend?
That's about a week after. And at that time, she attempted suicide, I think, by drinking very potent alcohol, a lot of it at once. And she rang me about half an hour before she attempted. I went over and rang the emergency because I thought that, something would have happened to the children.
Police at the time of the original investigation believed it may be possible that Susan had killed the children and then herself. Of course, finding the bodies 10 months later in the state they were in meant that wasn't an option. But there were many other theories about what happened to Susan, Andrew and Amy, and those theories were still being explored.
Can you think of any reason why a Korean crime gang, if there is such a thing, would have reason to harm Susan and the children?
Is that a spider? No! That's good. That's a smart boy.
Susan had been married to Nick Park for 4 years. They had met in Brisbane, where Susan worked in her uncle's Chinese restaurant.
Susan was actually of Chinese descent. Nick was Korean. Susan, being of Chinese descent, was, I believe, considered by Nick's mother to be not appropriate for her son. However, Nick's mother was very fond of the grandchildren. So that made up the difference, I think, at that time.
However, 1 month before Susan disappeared, she learnt that her husband had been seeing another woman.
Do you know, Mina, of anyone who would have had any reason to harm Susan and the children?
At the time she disappeared, she was very depressed and she was very enraged, I think, about the girlfriend.
Let me in!
Because they had a lot of fights between them, and she went to see Nick, where the girlfriend and Nick was living together in Ashfield, at least 2 times as I know.
He's my husband!
And there was a lot of confrontation. Nick's girlfriend might have a vengeful motive. That was probably the only person that she ever had fights with. She was a very gentle person.
Nick's girlfriend was only one consideration. Police also learnt that Nick was an avid gambler.
I think he was trying to fill up some gap in his life with the gambling habit. Just like filling up with the alcohol or drugs.
Less than a year before Susan went missing, the temporary Sydney casino opened. Its arrival not only attracted her husband, but there were rumours that loan sharks had also gathered there to prey on unlucky gamblers.
Gang punishment, Korean style. These scenes were filmed in the back streets of King's Cross earlier this year. It shows 2 young men forced to their knees in a mock show of respect to their attacker, then punched and kicked over money lent for gambling. Korean gangs specialise in loan sharking.
Loan sharking is an insidious activity, and if there are gangs involved, we want to see them smashed, and we want to see them out of the casino.
There's reportedly two rival gangs fighting over the rights to loan shark at the casino. Both charge exorbitant rates to finance gambling debts. Death is the ultimate price for non-payment.
Since Susan and the children's disappearance, there has been some media speculation in relation to Korean crime gangs in association with their disappearance. Can you think of any reason why a Korean crime gang, if there is such a thing, would have reason to harm Susan and the children?
I know for sure there is a gang, but I don't know what scale and where they're based. But if there are larger scale gangs with money, lending money and distortion and that sort of things, I don't know if there is any personal reason that why Susan and children would be hurt. If she had been hurt by people, maybe if my brother had borrowed money from, it could be possible.
Do you know of any person he owed a large amount of money to?
Not personally, because he was very secretive about his debts. But as far as I knew, if he was in really bad debt, he would usually ask for some money from my mother or myself or other friends.
Right, do you know who he gambled with? Was it any one group of people or person in particular?
I think most of the times, as far as I know, he was by himself.
Nick's gambling debts were one of the first things the original missing persons investigators followed up. At that time, little was known about Korean gangs in or around the casino. So Detective Letchford sought intelligence from overseas, especially America.
The intelligence that came back was suggested there that loan sharks have forced a person who owed them money to force their wife, their girlfriend or their daughter to work in either sweatshops or in brothels to repay the debt.
Police needed to speak with Nick immediately. But when they went to the flat Nick shared with his girlfriend, neither of them were home.
At this stage, we were very alarmed. We took out what's called a pass alert just in case Nick was going to leave the country. That afternoon, we received a phone call from Customs, and they told us that Nick was attempting to leave the country with a female.
We had no offence for which he could be detained at that time. We still weren't sure where Susan and the children were. We requested the Australian Federal Police if they could board the aircraft and perhaps one last time ask Mr. Park where his wife and the children were. Mr. Park again stated his family was in Queensland and that he was returning to Korea to visit a sick relative.
And that he would be returning in 10 days, returning to Sydney. And the federal agent checked his ticket out, and his ticket was in fact a return ticket.
And we had no choice at that time but to let him go. After receiving this information, Detective Spur and I both were of the opinion that he was on the run. He had done something or was aware of something that had happened and was fleeing from it.
A worldwide hunt involving Interpol is underway after the identification of 3 bodies dumped in a New South Wales forest. Police say the victims are a Sydney mother and her 2 children. Detectives are searching for the woman's husband.
The mother and children disappeared from their Eastwood home unit last October. Interpol's being called in to help find Mrs. Park's estranged husband, Sung, a heavy gambler who owed money to loan sharks.
12 days after Susan and the children had last been seen by their neighbour, Susan's estranged husband, Nick Park, and his girlfriend Demi had flown to Korea.
We believe at that time there was possibly 2 reasons as to why he was fleeing the country. Number 1, he had killed his wife and children. And number 2, perhaps Susan was being held against her will over some gambling debts of her brother by some Asian gangs, either as a hostage to some late payments or some money owed by Mr. Park, or possibly even placed into a brothel to pay off the debts that Mr. Park had gathered over the years.
Are you aware if Susan was ever a prostitute?
No. She had a debt with her uncle when she came to Australia. She had to pay off more than $20,000. She had worked day and night at the restaurants to pay off that debt. I know that she did pay off, and from my knowledge, she would not work as anything other than legal way to pay off whatever, if she had to pay off her husband's debt.
Do you know if that's a common practice in the Korean community?
It's not a common practice as such, as you described, but I know for a fact there is people selling people for some purposes, or being kidnapped or being sold for debt.
If such a situation did eventuate, would the children be involved in that?
Sometimes they do involve children, and they do kidnap children as well as adults.
The reason for that, is that for monetary return? For the return of the people?
It would most probably to do with debt.
We utilised the services of Task Force Oak, which was the Asian crime task force at the time. At our request, they attended a number of brothels in the Sydney metropolitan area with a photograph of Susan in an effort to perhaps locate her in these premises. We had no joy from that. Nobody at these premises recognised Susan's photograph.
While this theory could not be ruled out at that time, it wasn't furthering the missing persons investigation. And so the detectives moved on to their next scenario, that Nick had murdered his own family.
We obtained a search warrant to look at Mrs. Park's unit at Eastwood. The unit was pretty much in the same state as it was when we were there last time. There was no sheets on the bed, the wardrobes were empty, the furniture was packed in a way that perhaps it was ready to be moved. It actually looked like Mr. Park had not even been back since we had spoken to him.
We searched for signs of anything sinister that may have happened. There was no sign of any struggle. There was no sign of any blood or any other DNA material that we could locate.
Police then moved on to the flat Nick shared with Demi, but the result was the same.
We made some inquiries in relation to Susan's bank accounts, which is what we normally do when people go missing.
Susan had an account with the Commonwealth Bank, and they told us that the account had been activated on the 24th October, which was about a week after the last sighting of Susan and the children.
$300 had been withdrawn over the counter, which was the entire amount in Susan's account. Detectives also discovered that the children's account had been cleared of $400. It suggested that Susan may be alive. But what was interesting was the fact that the transactions had taken place at a branch that Susan had no reason to attend.
The branch was at Ashfield, which raised our concerns as to why, if it was Susan, she would be making this withdrawal from the Ashfield branch. The only link that she had with Ashfield was that her husband was seeing Demi, who resided in that suburb.
Detectives requested the bank for the CCTV tapes for the purpose of attempting to identify who it was that had made the withdrawal from Susan's account. So it could then find out, yes, Susan is alive and well, or that was somebody else making the withdrawal.
As the detectives waited for the footage, they received a phone call from Susan's neighbour. On the day that Nick had been at Susan's unit selling the furniture, she had noticed that he had thrown a number of documents into a rubbish skip. She thought, with all the police activity, it was worth a look. Inside, she found a letter from a car rental company directed at Nick.
We found out that Nick hired a car on the 19th of October, which was 2 days after the time that Susan was last seen, and he had not returned the car when he was supposed to.
When the car was hired, the manager told police that Nick was with an Asian woman. Police then showed him a photo of the couple, and he identified Susan as that woman.
She's the one, absolutely certain. She's the one.
And it was extremely important that we located that car to identify who'd been in it, fingerprint it, carried out all forensic service investigations on it to see if any foul play had taken place, whether the vehicle was used to transport bodies or whether Susan and the children are still alive and had just been driven to some safe location.
Because Mr. Park had left the country, we thought a good place to start would be the airport. The vehicle was found and escorted by police to a holding yard. In examining the vehicle, we were looking for anything which might indicate that Susan or the children were in the car. Things such as hair, blood stains, any items of clothing, any identification which might assist us in identifying who had been in the vehicle and what had taken place, if anything, in that vehicle.
There was nothing to indicate to us what had happened to Susan or in actual fact whether she'd ever been in the vehicle. Our hopes were dashed pretty well because that was the last avenue where possibly she may have been in the car and driven to some other location. We realised then that Susan and the children had met foul play.
Susan and the children were missing, presumed dead. Susan's husband, Nick Park, had hired a car, left it at the airport and flown to Korea with his girlfriend Demi. It was no surprise to the police that he hadn't returned to Australia after 10 days, as he had promised.
It was a real possibility at this point in the investigation that Mr. Park could get away with murder. We had no bodies, we had no evidence to suggest there had been a crime. There was nothing to link Mr. Park with their disappearance.
But from past history of such inquiries, eventually something does turn up, be it 12 months or 15 years down the track, something will eventually turn up. And as in this case, it did.
The remains were found 6 metres off the road, all within a 20-metre radius. According to locals, the area was once used as an illegal rubbish tip.
Very rocky, caves and things down there. There's no access at all, so whoever's dumped it down there sort of had the intentions of no one coming across it for years, I think.
Interpol's being called in to help find Mrs. Park's estranged husband, Sung. Mr. Park flew out of the country 6 days after his wife and children vanished from their Eastwood home last October. Police say it's possible the family became the victims of a payback by Asian crime gangs who were after her husband.
From my first involvement on the very first day, there was an inference that crime gang had some involvement in the deaths of Susan and the children. It became obvious to us that we either had to confirm that aspect of the investigation or refute it. If not, it would have been raised later at trial as a possibility. We enlisted the support of 2 specialist investigators from the South East Asian Crime Command. There was nothing to indicate from any of their inquiries that Nick Park had an extensive association with crime gangs. There was nothing to indicate that he'd ever borrowed large amounts of money from loan sharks that frequented the casino at that time. There was nothing to indicate that any crime gang had any involvement in the disappearance and subsequent murder of Susan and the children.
With that theory put to bed, police concentrated on finding evidence to link their prime suspect, Nick Park, to the murders.
From the outset of the investigation, we didn't have a crime scene. We couldn't prove where Susan, Andrew and Amy had been initially murdered. It was obvious to us that they'd been transported to the scene where they'd been found, obviously in the suitcases.
Inside those cases were clothing and other items that belonged to the 3 victims and came from their flat. Now the plastic bags that had been used as murder weapons were adding to an argument that the murder took place there.
We were lucky enough to find batch numbers on those plastic bags. We were able to identify a shop at the Macquarie Centre at Marsfield where those bags had been supplied. We subsequently showed photographs of Susan to the proprietor of that shop, who did recognise her as being quite a regular shopper, and that led us to believe that Susan, Andrew and Amy had been murdered at the Eastwood unit.
The only other person to have access to the flat was Nick Park. However, police needed to find further direct links between Nick, those items, and the place the bodies had been found.
After we located the suitcase, we noticed that we had some tyre tracks that were dried into the road verge. The time of year it had been fairly dry, so I was reasonably confident these tracks had been made sometime before because they were quite hardened. And I'm thinking, is this tyre track related to the vehicle that possibly pulled up here?
The car hired by Nick was repossessed and re-examined by the police. But the tyres did not match those at the scene, nor were there any signs that the suitcases had been in the boot.
If we could prove that the suitcases at some stage had been in the boot of that vehicle, then we've had a very strong case against Nick.
But their return to the car meant that they re-interviewed the manager. This time they showed him 16 photos of different Asian women. And instead of picking Susan, he went directly to a photo of Demi.
It wasn't a surprise to us that Demi was with Nick at the time the vehicle was hired. Whether Demi was aware of the purpose the vehicle was being hired, was unknown to us at that stage.
We didn't believe at that time that she had any direct involvement in their disappearance, but we were of the opinion that perhaps information that she might have obtained from Mr. Park, seen or overheard, could assist our inquiry.
Demi was not only seen at the car rental place, but also at the bank. When police viewed the CCTV footage on the day that $300 was taken from Susan's account, Demi was there. Police then obtained the withdrawal slip from that day and the ones used to close the children's accounts a few days before.
Susan, the mother, was the only signatory to those accounts. We subsequently subjected them to handwriting analysis by a police expert who confirmed that the signatures on the documents were obvious forgeries.
Those slips were then sent to the forensic laboratory to see if any fingerprint could be lifted.
When I received the forms, because they were a paper document, which is a porous surface, I determined that the most effective means of developing latent fingerprints on those items was using a process called ninhydrin. Ninhydrin is also a very sensitive chemical reagent that reacts with porous surfaces. On the document in the name of Andrew Park, I could see that there was a clearly identifiable palm print at the bottom of the document, which appeared to be a left palm.
Demi had no criminal record, and so there were no prints on file to compare. Nick, on the other hand, was a different story.
Nick Park, in his younger days, had come under notice of police for a minor fraud matter. His fingerprints were on our records. When we identified the palm print from the withdrawal slip of Andrew Park, that was cross-matched against our database, and it was indicated that the palm print was that of Nick Parks. This confirmed to us that Nick had been involved in the closure of the children's accounts the day after we believed that they had been murdered.
In those days after, police confirmed that Nick had also sold furniture, had pawned goods.
And I just wanted to find out. I mean, we paid $50 on the 14th.
And had even asked for a refund on monies paid in advance for his children's childcare.
Is that possible for us to get a refund for that?
Whilst it was always a possible motive for Susan and the children's murder that Nick was trying to raise money quickly, the amounts of money Nick was obtaining from the sale of these items was quite small. It seemed a fairly long bow to draw that a guy would kill his wife and 2 children for the purposes of raising perhaps a couple of $1,000s.
Police needed to find a motive, and in most homicides it comes down to love or money. And as police continued their investigation into gathering enough evidence to have Nick Park extradited from Korea, it was clear which one it was.
To your knowledge, are Nick and his girlfriend still living together or still seeing each other in Korea?
One of the things you look for in an investigation is to why a crime was committed. We had trouble coming to the terms with the fact that a father had killed their 3-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter. He could have always left Australia and travelled to Korea with Demi without harming Susan and the children. It became obvious to us that some catalyst to the violence must have taken place, so a large part of our investigation was conducted in an attempt to try and identify that catalyst.
When Susan had overdosed on her ginseng wine, she had been admitted to hospital and came under the care of a psychologist.
The psychologist had indicated to Susan she should try and look after herself and her future and that of the children. The psychologist had urged Susan to apply for child support and had facilitated putting her in contact with the child support agency to try and claim ongoing support from Nick. We contacted the child support agency. They prepared a letter addressed to Nick Park at the Ashfield address on the 15th of October, which was posted on the 16th of October and was most likely received at the Ashfield unit on the 17th of October. It was considered at that stage that could have been the catalyst for Nick to confront Susan.
While it was all circumstantial, police believed they had enough evidence to extradite Nick Park from South Korea to face the charges of murder. They just had to find him.
To your knowledge, are Nick and his girlfriend still living together or still seeing each other in Korea?
From what I heard from my brother, they had broken up a while ago.
Nick's contact with his family was sporadic.
He rang me on reverse charge in May or early June. At that time, he had started to work in James Rose English School in Bijangbu in Korea.
When Korean police checked, he had left there and gone underground.
For the purpose of this interview, can you state your full name?
My name is Song On Park.
But perseverance paid off. And exactly 1 year and 7 months after police believed Nick Park had killed his wife and children, he was back in Australia facing those charges.
Would you agree that early this morning Detective Woods and I escorted you back from Seoul in the Republic of Korea?
Yes.
And we arrived back in Australia at about 8:45 this morning?
Yeah.
And then we came straight here to the Surrey Hills Police Station?
Yes, we did.
Well, what I propose to do is ask you some questions in relation to the alleged murder of your wife and your son Andrew Park and your daughter Amy Park. Do you have any objections to answering those questions?
Yes, today I'm not going to answer any questions today.
So is it the case, Mr. Park, that at this stage, under legal advice, you don't wish to answer any questions?
It is.
All right. Is there anything further at all you wish to say about this matter?
No.
While Nick wasn't talking, his ex-girlfriend, who was still in Korea, was happy to tell police what she knew.
Demi told us that on the 17th of October, Nick received a letter from the Child Support Agency at the Ashfield unit. Upon opening this letter and seeing that Susan was applying for ongoing child support for her and the children, Nick became enraged. Demi indicated that Nick went to the Eastwood unit. He rang Demi at about 3 or 4 a.m. on the morning of the 18th of October, where he told Demi that their problems had finished and everything would be okay. Early in the morning, Nick then returned to the Ashfield unit, where Demi was waiting for him.
On that day, Nick put in the withdrawal papers for the children's accounts, leaving his palm print. The following day, Demi admitted she was with Nick when he hired the car.
Demi told us that after they'd hired the motor vehicle, they attended the flat at Eastwood that night. Demi stayed in the car while Nick went to the unit. He returned to the car with 2 suitcases. Nick placed those suitcases into the boot of the vehicle. They then drove to an area north of Sydney. She was unsure of the exact location as to where they stopped, but she described a bushland area with a dirt road. Nick stopped the vehicle and threw the 2 suitcases into the bush. They then returned to Sydney. Demi confessed that she had attended the Commonwealth Bank and withdrawn $300 from Susan's account by forging her signature, which was all done at Nick's request.
Nick accumulated $2,225 after he callously murdered his family and flew out of Australia believing he would never return.
We'd always believed that the money Nick had raised from closing the bank accounts, selling the furniture and pawning property had been used to purchase airline tickets for himself and Demi to travel to Korea. However, Demi indicated in this interview that the money had actually been used for Nick to go to the casino and gamble.
Demi was offered immunity from the fraud charges if she gave evidence against Nick at his trial. However, she was given no indemnity should the decision be made to prosecute her for any involvement in the murders. Staying in Korea was the safe option. But Demi attended court of her own accord.
The fact that Demi returned to Australia of her own free will to give evidence in the trial of Nick confirmed to me that she had no involvement in the murders of Susan and the children.
No charges were laid against Demi, and she is now back living in Korea. Her witness account, along with the other circumstantial evidence, was enough for a jury to find Nick guilty of killing Susan Andrew and Amy.
It was very pleasing to see that that the perpetrator in this case was brought back to Australia, stood trial, found was convicted and jailed.
Nick Park was sentenced to 26 years. His earliest parole date is 2017.
This would have to have been one of the most brutal, vicious killings that I can recall. I've seen persons shot dead. I've seen them bashed. But to murder two little children and the mother, I think that's one of the worst incidents I've ever known about as far as murder goes. I hope the bastard rots in hell.
Nevada, summer of 1998. The desert is still breathing heat at midnight. The highway is a black ribbon with no end, and somewhere between two nameless exits, a girl disappears without a sound. No scream, no witnesses, no body. Just a car, abandoned on the shoulder, blinkers still ticking in the dark like a failing heartbeat. Her name is Emily Carter, 19 years old, first year of college, honor student, oldest daughter of a small-town family that still leaves the porch light on for her, even now, decades later. At least that's how the story is told in Fern Creek, a town that never wanted to be on the map and then suddenly was, under the headline, Nevada 1998 Cold Case. It starts like every other ordinary day. Emily finishes a summer shift at the gas station on Route 17, a lonely strip of neon in the middle of nowhere. She clocks out at 9:58 p.m., waves goodbye to her coworker, jokes about the heat, and walks toward her old blue Honda parked under a flickering street lamp. The security camera catches her silhouette, a ponytail, a backpack, a quick glance over her shoulder. Then the image jumps, glitches, and she's gone. The tape will be played frame by frame, slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed by cops, FBI techs, internet sleuths, and late-night talk shows for years. They will look for a shadow behind her, a second figure, a hand reaching from the dark. They will never find it. In the official record, Emily leaves work alone. In every unofficial version, something follows her out into the night. Her route home is simple. From the gas station, she drives 15 miles down Route 17, cuts through the turnoff by mile marker 42, and then another 7 miles to Fern Creek. She's done it hundreds of times. She could drive it half asleep. Everyone says the same thing. But that night, she doesn't make it home. At 10:36 p.m., a trucker reports a car on the side of the road. Hazard lights on. Driver's door cracked open. Headlights still on low beam, barely cutting through heat, shimmer, and dust. When Highway Patrol arrives, they see the Honda parked neatly, as if someone had pulled over on purpose. No skid marks, no sign of impact, no broken glass, no bent metal, just a car waiting for a driver that isn't there. Inside, it's worse. Emily's purse is still in the passenger seat. Wallet, cash, student ID, phone in the cup holder, keys in the ignition. The engine is off. The air inside the car is already warming up, holding the faint smell of cheap gas station coffee and vanilla body spray. The officers open the trunk. Nothing. No struggle, no bloodstain, no sign of a fight. It's like she parked the car, stepped out, and dissolved into the desert air. By 11:30 p.m., her parents are calling everyone they know. By midnight, her father is already on the road, driving the route himself, eyes combing the ditches, the brush, the empty stretches of gravel shoulder. He passes the spot where her Honda was found. The patrol cars are still there, their blue and red lights spinning against the black sky. He pulls over and runs to the nearest officer, voice shaking, hands empty. "Where is she?" he asks. No one has an answer. The first 24 hours move fast. Too fast for a town this small. Deputies knock on doors. They talk to co-workers, friends, old boyfriends, ex-friends, secret crushes. They ask if she was depressed, planning to run away, hiding something. The answer from everyone is the same. No. Emily is the good girl, reliable, predictable, the one who brings extra snacks to study group and remembers everyone's birthday. Missing persons posters go up overnight. Her school photo, smiling, neat hair, soft lighting, printed in harsh black and white. They tape it to gas pumps, diner windows, motel lobbies, truck stops. Drivers fill their tanks under her stare and glance away quickly, as if looking too long might drag them into the story. The local news grabs it first. Fern Creek teen missing after mysterious roadside stop. Then state channels, then national. A lone car, a missing girl, an empty road in the middle of nowhere. It has all the ingredients that turn a tragedy into a headline. Satellite vans roll into town. Journalists set up in front of the Fern Creek Sheriff's Office, waiting for quotes, for tears, for that one image they can loop on screen every hour. By day 3, the search goes full scale. Volunteers line up at dawn. Ranchers, teachers, retired couples, high school kids in oversized orange vests. They spread out in grids across the scrubland, kicking at rocks, calling her name as if she might simply sit up from behind a bush and answer, embarrassed, apologizing for the inconvenience. The desert does not answer. Helicopters sweep overhead. K-9 units sniff along dry creek beds and barbed wire fences. They find nothing. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not a trace of disturbed sand that says a body was dragged. No crime scene, no suspect, just absence. It doesn't take long before the theories start. The first one is stranger abduction. Someone stops, offers help, maybe pretends to be a cop, maybe flashes a fake badge, maybe just pulls over and says, "You okay?" She lets her guard down for 1 second, one step too close to the wrong person. And that's it. But if that's what happened, where are the tire tracks from the second vehicle? Where are the footprints? Investigators walk the shoulder again and again, measuring, photographing, collecting soil samples. They bring in a forensic team from Reno. Every inch of earth is recorded. No clear second set of tracks is ever identified. The official narrative starts to wobble. Then it's the truckers. People love that one. A shadowy figure behind the wheel of a long-haul rig, cruising the interstate, picking victims at lonely exits. It's clean, it's cinematic, it feels like something you've already seen in a late-night movie. But the truckers are accounted for. Logs, manifests, receipts, way station slips, dozens of them pass through the area, but no one can be placed at the exact stretch of Route 17 at the right time. Then the rumors turn inward. Maybe it was someone she knew, a secret boyfriend, a jealous ex, a friend with a dark side. The sheriff's office starts digging into her personal life. Phone records, emails, notes passed in class. They pull a stack of diaries from under her bed, pink covers and little metal locks that are cut cleanly off. Pages are read, reread, held up in plastic bags as potential evidence. There are no confessions, no shadowy stranger described in the margins, just normal teenage worries, exams, future plans, fights with her mom, songs she likes, vague anxieties about leaving home. Meanwhile, cameras keep rolling. The story mutates into something larger. It's no longer just about Emily. It's about the road itself, Route 17. That empty, endless stretch of desert where people drive alone with their thoughts and their headlights and their secrets. Reporters start digging up every car found abandoned in a 50-mile radius over the last decade. Every unsolved assault, every missing person, every rumor of a hitchhiker who climbed into the wrong vehicle. Is there a predator hunting along Nevada's forgotten highways? One anchor asks, eyes wide, voice heavy. At home, the Carter family is trapped in a different kind of loop. The front door never fully closes. Neighbors bring casseroles, flowers, sympathy cards. The phone rings constantly. Tip lines, cranks, psychics, people who just have a feeling. Emily's mother sits at the kitchen table with a notepad, writing everything down anyway. A man in Arizona thinks he saw her at a bus station. A woman in Utah is sure she waited on her in a diner. Someone insists they heard a girl crying in the background of a late-night radio show. Every maybe feels like a rope thrown in the dark. They grab each one until their hands bleed. Days turn into weeks. The search area widens, then slowly collapses. Helicopters leave first. Dog teams stop coming. Volunteers have to go back to work, to school, to real life. Posters fade in the sun. The edges curl. The ink bleeds. New stories push Emily's face off the front page. In the sheriff's office war room, evidence boards fill the walls. A map with pins. A timeline marked with red string. Photos of Emily. Photos of her car. Still frames from the glitchy gas station footage. Reports stacked in boxes labeled Carter, Emily, open. Detectives stare at it all, night after night, waiting for a pattern to emerge, for some detail to jump out and scream, "You missed me." Nothing does. The case turns cold so quietly that no one can pinpoint the exact day it happens. There is no press conference for that. No closure, no declaration. The calls just grow less frequent. The press moves one town over. The tips get weirder, then slower, then stop altogether. A year passes, then 2, then 5. The boxes are moved down the hall, then into storage. Dust settles on the labels. But in Fern Creek, time does not move on so easily. The gas station where Emily was last seen adds new lights, new pumps, a fresh coat of paint. But late at night, workers still glance at the security monitors a little more often, remembering the old tape and its missing frames. Parents warn their kids not to drive alone after dark along Route 17. Some kids listen, most don't. They joke about the Fern Creek vanishing the way people joke about things that scare them. They dare each other to pull over at mile marker 42 and turn off the engine, sit in silence, and see if they feel anything. A chill, a presence, a hand on the door. Most feel nothing. Some swear they hear footsteps in the gravel behind the car when no one is there. Every few years, the story comes back. An anniversary piece on local TV, a long-form article in a regional magazine, a true crime blogger's deep dive. Each time, old wounds open, new theories surface. Witnesses remember fresh details that may or may not be real. The sheriff's office takes another half-hearted look at the file. A new detective skims the reports, convinced for a week or two that they will be the one to crack it. The wheel spins, then slows, then stops again. Missing, no body, no suspect. Officially, the case remains unsolved. Unofficially, it becomes something else, a legend, a warning, a quiet stain on the town's conscience. And then, after 25 years of silence, a headline cuts through the routine noise of another ordinary morning. Nevada, 1998, cold case solved. 3 lines of text, 1 word that no one in Fern Creek ever expected to see. Solved. Phones start ringing again. Old detectives get calls from reporters they thought had forgotten their names. People type Emily Carter into search bars and see her face appear on their screens as if she's stepped out of the past, unchanged, still 19. For the Carter family, the word solved lands like a thunderclap and an earthquake at the same time, because behind that single sharp word lies a new question, heavier than anything they've carried all these years. Who and how and why now? The answer, they're told, begins not in Fern Creek, not in Nevada, not in the desert at all. It begins in the fluorescent lit lab of a state crime center with a technician running an old forgotten piece of evidence through a machine that was barely science fiction back in 1998. A swab, a degraded sample, a profile that finally speaks. And somewhere miles away, an unsuspecting man will wake up, go to work, drink his coffee, and have no idea that the past is closing in on him, that the word solved is about to be written over his life in red. Because when a cold case moves after 2.5 decades of silence, it doesn't whisper, it detonates. The machine doesn't care about ghosts. It hums, clicks, blinks under fluorescent lights, pulling fragments of identity out of flecks too small for the naked eye to see. In the lab, there's no desert, no mile marker 42, no memories of a 19-year-old girl smiling in a school photo. There is just a swab, a number, and the cold language of probability. The evidence came out of a box that smelled faintly of dust and cardboard and old air conditioning. A box moved too many times. A box labeled with a case number and a year most of the new techs weren't even alive for. Carter, Emily, 1998. Inside, under plastic and paper and old reports, there's something that never got thrown away, not because someone believed in it, but because someone forgot to toss it. A tiny fabric scrap from the driver's side seatbelt, a stain so faint it looked like a shadow. Back then, the labs tried. The technology failed. Insufficient for testing, the report said. So it went back into the box, into the storage room, into the dark. Decades later, a cold case initiative opens those boxes again. One tech pulls the file, another pulls the envelope. Nobody expects much. These projects are like fishing in dried-up lakes. You cast anyway, but you don't hold your breath. Still, the swab is taken, the sample is run, the machine does its work. And this time, the numbers fall into place. A partial profile becomes a full one with enhanced amplification. A string of A's, T's, C's, G's locks into a digital fingerprint. A technician watches the data scroll up the screen, chewing the end of a pen, already reaching for the form to log yet another no-hit in the system. Then a small icon flashes, a sound pings, a green line appears where for 25 years there has only been red. Possible match. The profile is pushed into CODIS, the national DNA database. The system compares it to millions of samples, convicted offenders, arrestees, unsolved casework. It bounces from server to server in milliseconds, crossing states, crossing years, crashing headlong into the modern world Emily never got to see. And then, quietly, it stops moving. Hit confirmed. The first person to see the name doesn't know what it means. Just letters, just another suspect in another old case. They print it, staple it, drop it into a blue interoffice folder. The folder lands on a detective's desk with a soft, unremarkable thud. The detective picks it up, opens it, frowns. Because this is not just another name. The profile doesn't match a convicted felon who's been in and out of prisons for years. It doesn't match a drifter, a stranger, a ghost with a record in 3 states. It doesn't match a dead man whose crimes can be safely blamed from a distance. It matches a routine sample submitted in a completely different investigation, a minor assault, a bar fight that got out of hand 3 towns over, a swab taken as procedure, logged, stored, forgotten. And the man attached to it, he has an address, a job, a family, a Facebook profile with pictures of barbecues and ball games and Christmas mornings. He has a smile that looks normal, like any other man who never expected his DNA to reach back 25 years. And wrap itself around a missing girl's name. His name is Daniel Hayes, 48 years old, auto shop owner, 2 kids, wife, mortgage, lives in a quiet subdivision with trimmed lawns and American flags on porches, coaches youth baseball on weekends. Known around town as the guy who doesn't gouge you on repairs and will fit you in last minute if your car dies. And once, just once, he lived in Fern Creek. The detectives start digging old addresses, tax records, employment history. Yes, he worked there. Summers in the late 90s, a mechanic's assistant at a small garage off Route 17. Oil changes, brake pads, busted air conditioners. Routine repairs in a routine town. They pull old witness lists from the Carter file. Scan for his name. It isn't there. No one talked to him in 1998. No one thought of him. He was just another face in the background, another guy in greasy coveralls waving at drivers as they rolled past the shop. But the DNA doesn't care about memory. It says his biological material, his skin, his sweat, something of him, was on Emily's seatbelt the night she disappeared inside her locked car on the side of Route 17. And it says it with a mathematical certainty that doesn't leave much room for maybe. The case file that once gathered dust is suddenly pulled back into the light. New detectives, younger, sharper, armed with technology and a mandate, crowd around the evidence board that's rebuilt detail by detail. The old map goes back up on the wall. The string, the pins, the faces, the timeline. At the center, two photos stare at each other from opposite corners. Emily Carter, 19, Daniel Hayes, 48. Between them, 25 years of silence. The sheriff's office in Fern Creek gets the call. The voice on the other end is clipped, professional, vibrating with a restrained kind of excitement. We've got a hit on the Carter case. In the war room, the air shifts as if someone's opened a window. The older deputies who were there back then go very still. The younger ones glance around, realizing, maybe for the first time, that they are standing inside a story the whole town has been telling for decades. The lead detective, now mostly gray, sits down slowly. He was once the rookie on the case, the one who knocked on doors until his knuckles ached, who took statements, who stared at the empty stretch of road and swore to himself he'd never stop looking. He did stop. Life got in the way. Other cases, other victims, promotions, paperwork, routine. Now the case is back on his desk, not as a ghost, not as a regret, but as a living, breathing target. They start with the quiet work, surveillance, background interviews. They talk to people who know Daniel now, not then. Coworkers, neighbors, parents from the baseball team. The answers are predictable, almost scripted. He's a great guy. Always helps out. Good dad. Can't imagine him doing anything like that. They don't say the rest out loud, but everyone can hear the thoughts behind their eyes. If he could, what does that say about us? Agents go through his trash. They follow his car, watch his routines, map his habits. They trace his movements on the night of the bar fight that put his DNA in the system. They check his record again and again, looking for hints of violence, cruelty, a temper. It's clean. Too clean. No escalation, no pattern that fits the story people want. Escalating predator, inevitable monster. Instead, they find something else. Something worse, in a way. They find normal. In Fern Creek, the Carter family gets their own call. The detective who once stood in their living room 25 years ago stands there again. This time, he is heavier in the shoulders, lighter in the hair, slower in his movements. But his voice carries the same careful tone he used the first night he said, "We're doing everything we can." Except today, he's not here to say they don't know. "We've had a development," he tells them, hands folded together, hat held in front of him. A significant one. They listen in silence. He explains the DNA, the old sample, the new technology, the hit in the system, the name. A man they don't remember, or maybe they do, vaguely, but only as a blur in a grease-stained shirt behind a garage counter 25 summers ago. A family friend? No, not quite. An acquaintance. A person in the periphery. Someone who might have changed their oil once or twice. Someone who might have waved when they drove past. Someone Emily might have nodded to, said hey to, in the casual way of a small town where everyone is half familiar. To the Carters, the technical explanation collapses into one brutal, simple sentence. "We think we know who was with her that night." Emily's mother grips the arms of her chair until her knuckles turn white. Her father stares at a spot on the wall as if the years are projecting themselves there, rewinding, pausing. "Does that mean she's—" Her mother can't finish the sentence. The detective hesitates. The word hangs between them like a weight no one wants to pick up. "We still haven't found her," he admits. "But this is the strongest lead we've ever had. We're moving forward. We'll be making an arrest." "Arrest," her father repeats, tasting the word like something foreign. "So it's solved?" The detective doesn't answer directly, because he knows that in these cases, solved is a headline word, a clean word, a word that fits neatly in bold print. In real life, it's messier, it leaves gaps, it fills some holes and digs others deeper. "We're closer to the truth than we've ever been," he says instead. "That's what I can promise. Not long after, while Fern Creek is still waking up, while coffee makers drip in kitchen corners and children complain about getting out of bed, another town a few hours away is about to get its own wake-up call. It starts with a convoy. Unmarked cars move through quiet streets, rolling past mailboxes and swing sets. They park with practiced precision outside a beige two-story house with a basketball hoop over the garage. Birds scatter from the trees as doors open, and men and women in plain clothes step out, bulletproof vests hidden under jackets, badges ready to flash. Inside, Daniel Hayes is pouring cereal into a bowl. He's wearing an old t-shirt, shorts, bare feet. His daughter is at the table scrolling through her phone. His son is complaining about practice. The TV murmurs in the background, another day's news cycle starting up. There's a knock at the door, not a polite tap. A firm, measured knock that says, "Open now." His wife frowns, wipes her hands on a dish towel, starts toward the hallway. Daniel beats her there. He opens the door, sees the badges, the serious faces, the way they look past him as if cataloging exits, angles, threats. "Mr. Hayes," one of them asks. "Yeah," he says slowly. "Everything okay?" The lead agent shows his credentials, states his name, states Daniel's full name, states the words that always follow in these moments, words that have echoed in 1,000 arrest reports. "We have a warrant for your arrest." Confusion sharpens into fear. "What? For what? This has to be a mistake. I haven't..." "Nevada, 1998, the agent cuts in. "The disappearance of Emily Carter." The name hangs in the doorway like a ghost. His wife's hand flies to her mouth. His daughter's phone drops to the table with a clatter. His son stands frozen, one arm halfway into his backpack, and in that instant, their ordinary life, the life built carefully over years, splits down the middle. Neighbors peek from windows as he's led outside, handcuffed, flanked by agents. Daniel protests, voice climbing, insisting he doesn't know what they're talking about, that he had nothing to do with some girl going missing decades ago. Cameras are not supposed to be there, but they always are. A passerby records on a phone, the footage already halfway to the internet before the car door slams shut. The headline writes itself. Nevada 1998 cold case solved. Arrest shocks community. In Fern Creek, the news hits like a second sun rising. People gather around breakfast counters and office break rooms, staring at the photo on their screens. Some recognize him instantly, older but still familiar. Others don't recognize his face at all. And that unsettles them more. Because if he was here, if he lived among them, if he touched their cars, shook their hands, smiled at their kids. What else did they miss? The old-timers remember the garage, the kid who worked summers there, quiet, kept to himself, normal, always normal. A few recall seeing him talking to Emily once. Just a quick exchange near the pumps, nothing that seemed important at the time. The memory, aged and unreliable, blooms now with suspicious details that may never have existed. Nobody admits it out loud, but the same thought crawls through the town like a slow, dark tide. If he did it, how did we live next to him and never see it? At the sheriff's office, the phones explode. Reporters, former residents, bloggers, podcast hosts. Everyone wants a statement, everyone wants a quote, everyone wants to be first. Can you confirm the arrest? Is this case finally solved? Was the suspect known to the family? Is this the work of a serial predator? Did you miss him back then? The sheriff stands at a podium, reading from a prepared statement, every word weighed by lawyers and public information officers. Due to recent advances in forensic technology, investigators have identified a suspect in the 1998 disappearance of local resident Emily Carter. We have taken a subject into custody. This remains an active investigation. We will not be taking questions at this time. He steps away before the storm of voices can swallow him. In the war room, the board looks different now. Emily's photo is still there, eyes bright, smile frozen. But across from her, a booking photo of Daniel Hayes has joined her. Down below, new lines of red string connect old dots in new ways. The car, the seatbelt, the garage, the route, the timeline. For the first time, the story has a face on the other side. But for all the talk of closure, of justice, of finally solved, the questions multiplying in the background are not the neat ones that fit in a press release. Why was his DNA on her seatbelt? Did she know him well or barely at all? What really happened between the gas station and the shoulder of Route 17? And most of all, where is Emily? Because an arrest changes everything, but it doesn't resurrect the missing. And as the town watches the footage of Daniel being led into the courthouse, as the Carter family sits in their living room with the TV off, phones buzzing non-stop, one new truth starts to settle over everyone who has ever whispered cold case with a mixture of fear and fascination. Solving a mystery on paper is easy. Living with the answers, That's something else entirely. The interview room is small, square, and unforgiving. Gray walls, metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, 1 camera in the corner, a red light glowing steady, 1 clock ticking too loud. On the table, a paper cup of water that no one touches. Daniel Hayes sits with his hands cuffed in front of him, wrists resting on cold metal. He looks smaller in here than he did in the arrest footage. The bravado is drained away, washed out under fluorescent light. No neighbors watching now. No kids. No wife. Just him, the camera, and 2 people who have been waiting 25 years for this conversation. Detective Mason, older now, lines cut deep around his eyes, sits across from him. Beside Mason is a younger detective, Reyes, pen ready, eyes sharp, watching everything. They've rehearsed this. They've argued strategy in the hall. Good cop, bad cop. Gentle, then firm. Let him talk. Let the silence hang. See what he fills it with. The tape starts rolling. State your name for the record, Mason says. Daniel Hayes, he answers, voice rough but steady. Do you know why you're here, Mr. Hayes? He swallows, looks at the camera, looks back. You said something about a girl from Nevada, he mutters. From a long time ago. This is insane. I have no idea. Emily Carter, Mason cuts in, 19. Disappeared in 1998. We believe you were with her that night. Daniel laughs. It's a short, dry sound that dies quickly. I was what, 23? I don't even remember half the people I met back then. You're going to tell me I killed some girl I barely knew? Come on. Reyes leans forward, her voice calm. How long did you live in Fern Creek? Couple summers, he says. Came out, worked at the garage, saved money, went back. That's it. You worked at Route 17 Auto, correct? Yeah. Oil changes, AC repairs, nothing glamorous. Did you ever service Emily Carter's car? She asks. He hesitates. It's barely a pause, but they both see it. I don't know, he finally says. Maybe. We serviced a lot of cars. It was a small town. Everyone came through at some point. Mason slides a photo across the table. It's the old blue Honda, the one found abandoned on the shoulder. The image is grainy, sun-faded, corners bent from years of being pinned and unpinned from evidence boards. You remember this car? Mason asks. Daniel stares at it. His jaw tightens. His fingers tap once on the table before he catches himself. It's a Honda, he says slowly. We saw a lot of those. I can't say if that exact car ever came in. You sure? Mason asks, voice soft. Take another look. He pushes a second photo over, the license plate, a service sticker on the windshield, with the faded logo of Route 17 Auto and a date from early 1998 written in blue ink. The kind of detail no one looks twice at, except detectives who've lived with a case for decades. Daniel's eyes lock on the sticker. He blinks. Once, twice. I didn't write that, he says. We didn't say you did, Mason replies. But it means her car was serviced at your shop a few months before she disappeared. So? Daniel snaps, anger flashing now. Half the town came through there. You gonna arrest everyone? Reyes doesn't flinch. We're not arresting everyone, she says. Just you. Silence presses down on the room. The clock ticks. The camera watches. Mason leans back, folds his hands. You know about DNA, Mr. Hayes? He asks. About how far it's come? Yeah, I watch TV, Daniel mutters. We pulled a sample from the driver's side seatbelt of this car, Mason continues. Back in 1998, we couldn't do much with it, not enough material. Technology wasn't there. That's changed. He pauses, lets the words sink in. We reran the sample. It came back with a full profile. That profile matched a sample collected from you in connection with a bar fight 3 years ago. The odds of that happening by chance are astronomically low. Reyes slides a sheet of paper in front of him. Numbers, graphs, lines that mean everything and nothing at the same time. That's your DNA on her seatbelt, Daniel, she says quietly. Inside her car, the night she vanished. He stares at the paper like it's written in a language he doesn't recognize. There are 1,000 ways he could respond, 1,000 lies, 1,000 half-truths, 1,000 honest reactions. He chooses one path instinctively, like a man stepping in the only direction he sees. That doesn't mean I did anything, he says. If her car came into the shop, I might have driven it, buckled in, unbuckled. That's how DNA works, right? You touch something, you leave a trace. That doesn't make me a killer. Reyes glances at Mason. They've prepared for this too. The innocent transfer argument. Defense attorneys love it. Juries are wary of it. It's a crack in the foundation of what the prosecution wants to build. A clean, undeniable line between the seatbelt and the suspect and the victim. That's possible, she says. If there was a record of you test driving her car, there isn't. You don't show up on any invoice. No signature, no name, just the shop's stamp. It was a cash town, he argues. Half the time we didn't log every little thing, you know that. Mason leans forward again, eyes hard now. Maybe, he says. But here's what I know. Her car was found on the side of Route 17, driver's door open, keys in the ignition, her purse still inside, her phone, her wallet, her whole life. She vanishes. No blood, no struggle, nothing disturbed. The only foreign DNA on the belt that should have been hers is yours. Daniel shakes his head again and again, like he can physically remove the idea from the air between them. You're twisting this, he says. You're desperate. You got a town breathing down your neck, a family that wants answers, and a piece of science you barely understand. You picked the wrong guy. You remember where you were the night she disappeared? Reyes asks. 25 years ago? He snaps. No, nobody does. I do, Mason says quietly. Daniel looks at him, surprised. When you lose the right kind of thing, Mason continues, you remember exactly where you were when it happened. The line hangs there. Reyes doesn't write it down, but it's etched into the room. We pulled your employment records, she says, shifting back to facts. You were working the late shift at the garage that summer. You clocked out around the same time Emily left the gas station. You lived less than 10 minutes from where her car was found. Lots of people did, he shoots back. Ranch hands, cops. You trying to say everyone in that radius is a suspect? You're not everyone, Mason says. You're the one whose DNA is in her car. Daniel's breathing quickens. His eyes flick to the door, to the camera, to the mirror he knows is not just a mirror. He's calculating, weighing, feeling the walls press in. Lawyer, he says suddenly. I want a lawyer. The clock ticks once more. Mason nods slowly. Okay, he says. That's your right. This interview is over. But as they stand, as the chairs scrape back, Mason leans in just enough for Daniel to hear him and the microphone to barely catch it. Just so you know, he says, voice low, the story doesn't stop because you do. We're going back. Every witness, every inch of that road, every hour of that night. You're not just a name on a file anymore, Daniel. You're the man sitting across from me. They walk him out. The door shuts. The camera's red light goes dark. Outside the room, the world is already reacting. On TV, pundits say the word closure like it's a pill you can hand to a family and expect their pain to dissolve. They point at graphics, show timelines, trace arrows on maps from the gas station to the garage to the shoulder of Route 17. They introduce Daniel's booking photo with a caption that might as well be a verdict. DNA links Nevada mechanic to 1998 cold case. Community reeling after arrest in Emily Carter disappearance. Podcasts record emergency episodes. True crime forums light up, threads multiplying by the hour. Some people had theories for years. Pet suspects they posted about late at night. Now they pivot. I always thought it was someone local. The DNA doesn't lie. Check his history. This can't be the only one. I never bought the stranger on the highway theory. Others push back. DNA can get transferred. He worked on her car. Of course it'd be there. Where's the rest of the evidence? They just needed a guy to blame. The town of Fern Creek is split into two uneasy camps. Those who breathe, finally, and those who whisper, are we sure? And in the middle of it all, holding on to every breath, is the Carter family. They sit at the same kitchen table where they once took notes from tipsters and psychics and strangers. The posters have been taken down years ago, but the tape marks are still faintly visible on the walls. Time moved, the house aged, they did too. But in certain corners it feels like 1998 never ended. On the table now, instead of missing person flyers, are legal folders. Victim advocate numbers, court dates, terms they never wanted to learn, preliminary hearing, probable cause, DNA probability ratios, no body prosecution. Emily's mother turns the words over in her mind like foreign coins. Her father, who once drove every stretch of Route 17 looking for tire marks, sits with his jaw clenched, veins standing out in his neck as he watches a replay of Daniel being led into the courthouse. That's him? He asked quietly. That's him, the detective had said. Now, seeing the man in motion, seeing the way he doesn't bow his head, doesn't hide his face, the way he looks almost annoyed by the cameras, something inside him hardens. He doesn't care about the legal nuances, the statistical models, the alternative explanations. For him, there is a before and an after. Before, a face he wouldn't have remembered. After, the man who might have taken his daughter from the side of a lonely road and erased her from the world. Might. The word is a hook that keeps catching. Because even as the state talks about moving forward, about charges, about presenting the case to a grand jury, one fact remains like a black hole in the middle of all the noise. They still don't have Emily, no grave to visit, no body to identify, no physical proof of what actually happened between the moment she left the gas station and the moment her car was found. The road between those 2 points is only miles long, but in the investigation it stretches like an ocean. Back in the sheriff's office, teams are deployed. They go back to Route 17 with drones, ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs that were not even born when Emily went missing. Technology has changed. The desert hasn't. The sun still burns. The dust still rises. The wind still covers tracks as quickly as they're made. They walk the shoulders. They scan dry creek beds. They search old wells you wouldn't see unless you knew exactly where to look. They knock on doors of ranches again, this time not asking about a missing girl, but about an old mechanic who used to work summers there, who maybe came by asking for side jobs, who maybe asked about empty sheds or land to store junked cars. Memories are foggy. Owners have changed. Land has changed hands. Where there was once an open lot is now a self-storage facility. Where there was an abandoned shack is now a concrete foundation for a chain restaurant. Time is the accomplice in every cold case. Still, small things surface. An elderly rancher remembers seeing a blue Honda parked for a few hours near a dried-out arroyo the week before the disappearance. A former co-worker of Daniel's recalls a day when he showed up late, clothes dusty, saying his truck broke down on the back road and he had to walk further than he planned. None of it is precise, none of it is enough, but each story is a thread that might tie him to the landscape in just the wrong way. As investigators dig into Daniel's past, they also find a quiet patch of darkness in his otherwise ordinary life. A brief stint years ago in anger management after an incident at a different job, shouting, a shove, a tool thrown, a girlfriend who filed a restraining order, then withdrew it, saying it was a misunderstanding, a neighbor who remembers hearing yelling late at night and something breaking but never called the cops. Nothing that screams, killer, enough that whispers, capable. In court, at the preliminary hearing, the air is electric. Reporters line the hallway, court sketch artists sharpen pencils, members of the public line up early hoping for a seat. Some knew Emily, some didn't. All feel, on some level, that they're witnessing the turning of a page that's been stuck for decades. Daniel is brought in, wearing a jail jumpsuit. His lawyer, sharp suit, calm eyes, stays close. The Carter family sits in the second row, hands joined tightly together. Emily's mother doesn't look at Daniel at first. She stares straight ahead, eyes fixed on the judge's bench. When she does glance sideways, it's quick, like staring at the sun. The prosecutor lays out the basics for the court: the disappearance, the abandoned car, the absence of any explanation, the old evidence, the new DNA, the match, the employment records tying Daniel to Fern Creek at the time, the proximity of his job and home to the crime scene. He says the words compelling, overwhelming, critical. He says justice delayed is not justice denied. He says the state intends to seek the maximum penalty allowed by law. Daniel's lawyer stands, adjusts his tie, and offers a different story. He admits the DNA. There's no point fighting that, but he reframes it as what Daniel claimed in the interview: transfer, not a smoking gun. If he touched her car in the course of his job, if he buckled the seatbelt during a test drive, then of course his trace would be there. The state, he says, is taking a single scientific result and retrofitting a narrative around it because they need a villain more than they need the truth. No eyewitnesses, he says, no confession, no murder weapon, no body. Just a man who once lived and worked in a small town now being offered up to erase 25 years of investigative failure. The words sting, especially for the cops in the room who've lived with this file like a scar. The judge listens, unmoved. This isn't a trial, not yet. This is about whether there is enough to go forward, enough to bind this man to this story in a way that can't be undone. There is. The judge rules that the case will proceed. Bail is denied. Daniel is led away, eyes flicking, just once, to the second row where Emily's family sits. Their gazes meet for a fraction of a second. It's not cinematic, no overt anger, no shouted accusations, just a brief collision of lives that, on paper, were always destined to intersect in this room. Outside the courthouse, microphones rise like metal weeds. "Do you feel like you're closer to justice?" someone asks Emily's mother. She opens her mouth, closes it, then finally says, "I don't know what I feel. I just want my daughter home." The cameras capture it. The country hears it. But behind that simple sentence is a deeper truth that doesn't fit neatly into a soundbite. Because the case now has a suspect, it has a timeline, it has DNA, lawyers, hearings, headlines that say solved. And yet, somewhere out there, hidden in desert dirt or forgotten storage or behind a secret someone never dared share, is the one thing no lab, no statistic, no courtroom story has delivered: The missing piece that tells them what really happened on that hot Nevada night when a 19-year-old girl drove down a familiar road and vanished between 1 mile marker and the next, leaving behind a car, a seatbelt, and a town that still can't quite breathe. The podcast episode drops at 3:00 a.m. By 8 o'clock a.m., it's already in the top 10. A sleek, ominous thumbnail, a faded photo of Emily Carter on one side, the desert highway on the other, and in the middle, bold white text. Nevada 1998, The Vanished Girl, and the Man Next Door. True crime has changed since Emily disappeared. Back then, stories lived on grainy news broadcasts and folded newspapers. Now they live in earbuds, on screens, in endless comment threads where strangers dissect strangers' lives with forensic intensity. In one episode, 48 minutes long, a host who has never set foot in Fern Creek manages to do what 25 years of actual living there never did. He turns the town into a myth. He talks about Route 17 as if it's cursed. He paints Emily as the all-American girl, Daniel as the neighbor no one suspected, the sheriff's office as beleaguered small-town cops out of their depth. He quotes sources close to the investigation in a voice that suggests he's exposing something hidden, when really he's just reading between lines others have already printed. But perception is power. People in Fern Creek listen to the episode on their morning walks, in their cars, in the back offices of their businesses. They hear their town described in cinematic, ominous terms. They hear the old rumors given new life, the possibilities magnified. They hear Daniel's name spoken in the same breath as predator, pattern, dangerous. They also hear something else, a word the host drops almost casually halfway through, a stray spark that lands in dry grass. Sources indicate investigators are exploring possible links between the Carter disappearance and at least one other unsolved case along Nevada's secondary highways. Possible links, at least one other case. Nobody in Fern Creek was told that. The sheriff's office claims they never said it. The state crime lab says they haven't confirmed anything. The host refuses to name his source. It doesn't matter. The idea is out now, spreading fast. What if Emily wasn't the only one? In the war room, the mood shifts yet again. They've been here before. Truth twisted into narrative, half facts amplified until they drown out the measured voice of actual evidence. But this time, there's enough substance behind the whisper that it can't be dismissed outright. Because in a cold case review months earlier before the DNA hit, a junior analyst did flag something odd. An unsolved disappearance from 2000, another young woman, another car found abandoned along a quiet stretch of road, this one 2 counties over. No body, no clear suspect, no resolution. The case never reached national airwaves, never caught a producer's eye. It lived and died in a thin file in a different sheriff's office. Her name was Lisa Marrow, 22. Last seen leaving a late shift at a diner off a rural exit. Abandoned car, personal items untouched, no signs of a struggle. Sound familiar? Back then, the link was circumstantial at best. 2 young women, 2 cars, 2 lonely roads. If you widen the circle enough, you can make almost anything look like a pattern. Without DNA, it was just a question pinned on a board and then pulled down again. Now, with Daniel sitting in a cell, that old file is dragged back into the light. Maps go up, highways are traced, old case officers get calls they never expected. The FBI, once tangential, edges closer. It becomes the next what if. Did Daniel pass through that town too? Did he drive those roads? Did he have a reason to be anywhere near the exit where Lisa disappeared? They check his employment records, bank statements, any scrap that places him in space and time 25 years ago and 23 years ago. They find gaps, summer trips, temporary contracts, cash jobs that left no paper trail. Enough to make a prosecutor lean forward, enough to make a defense attorney sharpen their knives. The press, as always, gets there first. Investigators probing links between Nevada cold cases, one headline reads. Was Emily Carter just the first? Another asks. The Carter family sees Lisa's face for the first time, printed right next to their daughters, 2 smiling young women separated by 2 years and 100 miles, and a desert that swallowed them both. Emily's mother can't sleep. She stays up late, scrolling through story after story, clicking on grainy photos and timelines and theory threads until all the details blur together. Every missing girl becomes her daughter. Every empty car becomes the Honda on Route 17. Every unnamed suspect becomes Daniel's face. Her husband finally takes the laptop from her gently, closes it, sets it out of reach. This doesn't change what happened to Emily, he says quietly. No, she whispers. It just means it might have happened to someone else too. In his cell, Daniel hears about other cases before his lawyer does. Prison walls are thin for information. News bleeds through TV sets mounted high in common areas, through snippets of conversation between guards, through new inmates who smuggle in gossip like contraband. He hears his name paired with words like serial, monster, connected, and something primal flares in him, a mix of rage and terror. The first time another inmate calls him Route 17, he snaps, he lunges, hands out, grabs fabric and skin. Guards pull him off, shove him against a wall, pin his arms. The other inmate is fine, more startled than hurt, but the incident goes in a report. The prosecutor will read that report. The jury, if it gets that far, might hear about it. Impulse control issues, someone will say. Acts out under stress. His lawyer, a man used to handling frightened anger disguised as indignation, leans over the plastic table during their next legal visit, voice low, eyes firm. "You cannot do that again," he says. "They will use every outburst against you. You understand me?" Daniel's hands are shaking. "They're calling me a serial killer," he hisses. "On TV, on the internet. They're taking some girl I never met and tying her to me because they screwed up their jobs for decades and need a story to make everyone feel better." "Then give me something else," the lawyer says. "Give me anything that proves you weren't anywhere near those places when these women disappeared. Bank statements, receipts, pay stubs, someone you were with. Because right now, all I've got is I don't remember and a lot of righteous anger. That doesn't win trials. That feeds headlines." Silence stretches across the table. "I didn't kill that girl," Daniel says finally, voice breaking for the first time. "Emily, I didn't kill her. I didn't kill anyone. I worked, I went home, I got out of that town and never looked back. I have a life, I have kids. Why would I throw all that away for some girl I barely knew?" The lawyer holds his gaze. "Juries don't ask why first," he says. They ask, could he? Then they ask, did he? If the story makes sense and the evidence lines up, they fill in the why themselves. You need more than outrage, Daniel. You need something solid. Memory, though, is not solid, not after 25 years. It warps, it softens. All the sharp edges that could prove him innocent or guilty have been sanded down by time into vague impressions. "I don't know where I was that night," he says again, quieter. "I just know I didn't take her." He says it again and again. The camera in the visiting room records nothing. But if it did, it would show the same sentence repeated like a prayer to a god that doesn't answer court summons. Back in Fern Creek, another person is wrestling with memory. Her name is Rachel Manning. She's 39 now, married, 2 kids, works at a clinic in a bigger town down the highway. In 1998, she was 12 and lived 3 houses down from the Carters. She remembers Emily as the nice older girl who once helped her with algebra, who wrote a note in her yearbook that said, "You're smarter than you think. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She also remembers something else. Not a face, not a license plate, not a confession, a feeling. A summer night, weeks before Emily disappeared. A walk home from a friend's house just as the sky turned from purple to black. The sound of an engine idling a little too long at the corner. A car she didn't recognize, hanging back, moving slowly as she turned onto her street. She walked faster. The car rolled forward. Her skin crawled. Then a voice from a porch, her father calling her name. The car sped up and drove past. She didn't see the driver's face, just a silhouette, just a shape, just the weight of eyes she couldn't prove were there. She never told anyone. It felt silly, childish, paranoid, and then Emily vanished. And what had felt silly started to feel like a clue that came too late. She mentioned it once, years later, in a late-night conversation with a friend after too many drinks, when they were swapping creepy things that happened to us as kids. She brushed it off. The friend forgot. Now she's listening to a podcast and hearing her childhood street turned into a crime scene from a movie, and that memory rises up, sharper than it has been in decades. She tries to push it down. Thousands of weird little moments happen in a lifetime. Most mean nothing. But over the next days, it gnaws at her. The way the headlights moved, the sound of the engine, the taste of metallic fear in the back of her throat. Her husband notices the way she stares at nothing some evenings, fingers tapping the table. "You okay?" he asks. She hesitates. "I think I need to call someone," she says. The detective assigned to field new tips on the Carter case is not expecting much when he picks up the phone. Most calls they get now are noise. Psychics, cranks, people trying to get their names into the story. But as she speaks, giving her full name, her connection to the family, the specific memory, something in her voice cuts through his skepticism. She's not excited, she's not dramatic, she's careful. embarrassed almost. I know it's been forever, she says, and maybe it's nothing. But I was on that street a lot that summer, and there was one night, there was this car. He asks her to slow down, to tell it again, to give him every detail she can. Color of the car, dark. A sedan, maybe blue, maybe black. Make? She was 12. It was just a car. Driver, male, she thinks. Short hair. But she never saw the face clearly. What made you notice it? He asks. It wasn't supposed to be there, she says softly. I knew every car on that street, every neighbor. This was wrong, and I felt watched. The way you feel someone staring even when you can't see their eyes. He writes it all down. He knows how fragile memory is. He knows how dangerous it can be to build anything heavy on something so light. But he also knows that people bury real things sometimes, and that fear can preserve details more sharply than familiarity ever could. Do you remember if you ever saw that car again? He asks. She hesitates, the silence stretching. I'm not sure, she says. But there was this one time at the gas station. My dad was filling up, and I was in the passenger seat. I looked across the pumps and saw a car that felt familiar, like the one from that night, and there was a guy leaning against it, talking to someone at the counter. I remember thinking, is that him? And then immediately thinking, don't be stupid, it's just a car. She laughs, but it's brittle. Do you remember his face? The detective asks. Not clearly, she says. Just dark hair, grease on his hands, a work shirt like a mechanic. The detective's pen slows, his heartbeat does not. Rachel, he says carefully, I'm going to send you some photos. Old ones. People from town back then. Mugshots now. I want you to take your time. If you don't recognize anyone, that's okay. If you think you do, I need you to be honest with yourself about whether it's a real memory or just something your brain is filling in now that you've seen him on the news. I know, she says. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to hurt the wrong person. Good, he replies. That's exactly why I believe you're worth talking to. Later, she sits at her kitchen table as her kids watch cartoons in the other room, her laptop open to a secure link the detective sent. Faces appear one by one. Some she recognizes from childhood, a teacher, a former neighbor, the old sheriff, now older, lined, changed. Others are strangers. One appears after a click, and her breath stops in her chest. Older, thicker around the middle, hair thinner, grayer at the temples. But the set of the jaw, the angle of the shoulders, the way he's looking at the camera with a mixture of annoyance and wariness. Her gut twists. She closes the laptop, opens it, looks again. Is she recognizing him from that night? From the gas station? Or from the news, the endless photos, the podcast cover, the articles? The brain is a ruthless editor. It cuts and splices without permission. When the detective calls back, she chooses her words with surgical care. I saw someone who could be him, she says. I'm not saying 100%. I'm saying my memory and his face rhyme, but I don't know if that's because of what happened or because of what I've seen lately. It's not the clear, clean ID the prosecution would love, but it's something, a whisper in the same direction the DNA is already pointing. Slowly, the case is becoming not just numbers and profiles and timelines, but a shape, a shadow moving through the edges of people's lives in 1998, unnoticed at the time, obvious in hindsight. In court, when this gets to trial, if it gets to trial, the prosecutor will stand and talk about that shadow, weaving it into a story that the jury can hold in their hands like a stone. The defense will stand and try to shatter it piece by piece. Outside, the desert waits. The wind moves over old ground, over dry creek beds and forgotten trails and places no one visits unless they have a specific reason. Somewhere out there, if Emily never left that stretch of land, there may still be the slightest trace of her buried under years of dust and indifference. Cadaver dogs sniff the air. Radar pulses through soil. Experts walk slow grids with eyes trained to catch anything that doesn't belong. A scrap of fabric, a fragment of bone, a sign that this isn't just a story about a man in a seatbelt in a town desperate for an ending, because headlines call it solved. But until they find her, until someone can answer the simplest, cruelest questions, where, how, when, this case lives in a twilight zone between closed on paper and open in the hearts of everyone who ever drove past mile marker 42 and felt the hair on the back of their neck stand up for reasons they couldn't quite explain. The first thing they lose isn't the house or the car or the business, it's the silence. For years, the Hayes family lived with the kind of quiet you don't notice until it's gone. Kids yelling, TV humming, garage door rumbling, neighbors calling hello across lawns, normal suburban noise. Then the arrest hits the news, and all of that is replaced by a different sound, whispering. At first, it's just at the edges, a conversation that stops when his wife walks into the grocery aisle, a neighbor who used to wave pretending suddenly to study their phone, parents at the ball field turning their backs, voices dropping when the Hayes kids get close. Then it gets louder, screenshots of headlines sent in group chats, schoolyard jokes sharpened into knives. Hey, did your dad kill that girl? Is he a serial killer, like on Netflix? You're Route 17's kid, right? The principal calls Daniel's wife in for a meeting. He chooses his words carefully, watching her like she's made of glass. We're doing everything we can to keep the kids safe, he says. Emotionally, I mean. But this is big. There's only so much we can control. She sits straight-backed in the chair, fingers laced so tightly in her lap her knuckles are white. They didn't do anything wrong, she says. My kids, they didn't ask for this. I know, he says, but we can't stop other kids from hearing things at home. Things. Not facts, not lies, just things. At night, when the house is finally quiet, she lies awake and replays everything she has ever known about the man jailed under her last name. She met Daniel long after Fern Creek, long after he left Nevada behind. To her, he was never the 23-year-old mechanic at some dusty highway garage. He was the guy with the easy smile who fixed her transmission for half price and refused to take her money the first time he came over to look at a broken dishwasher, the one who brought donuts to the nurse's station where she used to work, the one who cried when their kids were born. She remembers his hands on her shoulders when her father died, his voice when their son broke his arm, his face when she told him she was pregnant the first time. None of it matches the booking photo looping on the news. But then another memory slips in, one she has never given weight until now. A late drive years ago, an argument. She doesn't even remember what sparked it, something stupid. Money, hours, a missed school play. He slammed the door, said he needed air, and left. When he came back 3 hours later, he was calmer. Also, distant. She asked where he'd gone. He said, just drove, and changed the subject. She never pressed. Now, under the glow of a bedside clock, that shrug feels heavier. How much of someone can you know if there's 25 years of their life you never saw? How far back does trust go? Where does it stop? She doesn't sleep much. When she does drift off, the dreams that find her are bad rewrites of news segments. Her husband's face side by side with a girl she never met, a road she's never driven, a town she's never visited, all lit up by red and blue flashes. She's not the only one revisiting the past. Hundreds of miles away, in a cluttered back office behind a newer, shinier auto shop that replaced the old Route 17 garage, an aging manager pulls down a battered cardboard box from the top shelf of a storage rack. The label is faded, marker ink turned almost purple with age. 1998, work orders. When the cold case team first called, he swore he didn't have anything. Who keeps 25-year-old invoices? But guilt is a powerful archivist. Something made him check again, a nagging voice saying, what if? He slices the box open. Inside, a mess of paper, carbon copies, smudged signatures, stapled receipts, the smell of old oil and dust trapped between pages. He digs, car after car, oil change, tire rotation. AC recharge, total $49.99, total $63 on 12, names that mean nothing now. And then, halfway down, he sees it. Carter E. Honda, blue. License plate matches the one from the case file. He doesn't need the detectives to confirm it. There's a scribbled note in the corner of the work order nearly eaten by the edge of the staple. Test drive, DH. He stares at the initials for a long time. He knows what DH stands for. When the detectives arrive, he holds out the paper like something that might burn him if he touches it too long. I didn't remember this until I saw the box, he says. I swear, back then I wouldn't have thought twice about it. We test drove cars every day, but that's his handwriting. Those are his initials. Mason takes the paper, slides it gently into a protective sleeve. He feels the case tighten around Daniel like a noose. You remember anything about that day? Reyes asks. He frowns, digs around in an overfull memory. Busy summer, he says. Hot as hell. AC was going out on half the cars we saw. I remember a blue Honda with a kid sister in the passenger seat once, but I don't know if that was her. A lot of cars, a lot of faces. Do you remember him ever talking to her? Reyes presses. Flirting? Offering a ride? I don't know, he says, frustration creeping into his voice. He was quiet, You know, not the type to hit on customers in front of me. But I do remember one thing. He liked test drives, always volunteered. Said it was time to clear his head. Clear his head where? Mason asks. He gestures vaguely. Down the highway, he says. Sometimes he'd be gone longer than he needed to be. We figured he was just dragging his feet, avoiding the next oil change. I never thought... His voice trails off. On tape, under fluorescent lights, it plays like a small detail, an extra thread to tug on. Outside, in headlines, it turns into something sharper. Mechanic who drove victim's car alone, now prime suspect. Former boss. He took long test drives to clear his head. Meanwhile, in a different building with thicker walls and heavier doors, Daniel sits on the edge of his bunk as his lawyer lays the work order on the table between them during their next meeting. Do you recognize this? The lawyer asks. He looks down, sees the date, the plate, his own cramped initials. A weird vertigo hits him, a lurch between then and now. Yeah, he says slowly. We wrote those all the time. That's my handwriting. You test drove her car, the lawyer says. You buckled that seatbelt. That's our explanation for the DNA. That's our through line. But you can see how they're going to spin this, right? He had access. He was alone in her car. He knew the feel of it. He knew the route. But that's the truth, Daniel insists. I drove it. I brought it back. That's it. That's the whole story. Well, then you need to remember everything you can about that day, the lawyer says, because they will turn every blank space into something ugly. What time was it? Did she wait at the shop or leave? Did you talk? Did you see her again? Did you ever take her car out a second time? I don't know, he snaps, voice cracking. Do you remember every car you sat in 25 years ago? Every person you small-talked with while filling out paperwork? It was a summer job. It was just noise. Not anymore, the lawyer replies. Now it's evidence. Across the state, in a federal lab that looks more like a clean tech startup than a crime scene facility, another kind of evidence sits under brighter lights. The original gas station security tape has been digitized and enhanced with software that didn't exist when it was first recorded. What was once a grainy VHS with tracking lines is now a cleaner, sharper frame-by-frame file on a high-resolution monitor. An analyst scrubs back and forth through the key minutes for the 10th, 20th, 50th time. 9:58 p.m. Emily walks out. Ponytail, backpack, quick glance over her shoulder. 9:59 p.m. Static noise, a digital hiccup. 3 seconds vanish, replaced by scrambled lines. 10 o'clock p.m. Her car's headlights come on. She pulls away. For years, investigators chalked that glitch up to warped tape, cheap cameras, heat, whatever. Now, with better tools, the analyst leans in closer. He freezes the image right before the glitch, blows it up, enhances, noise thickens, pixels stretch. It's still mostly useless, but in the background, just at the edge of the frame, something catches his eye. A shape, not Emily, not her Honda, something lower, longer, parked farther from the lights. He toggles filters, adjusts contrast, runs the segment through an algorithm that guesses outlines based on shadow and light. The shape resolves into the suggestion of another car, different from hers, dark, parked off to the side. It wasn't logged, no one mentioned it. The old report lists only her vehicle in the lot. The analyst runs the few frames before the glitch in a loop, the phantom car, static flicker, return. On one pass, at the exact moment the image begins to break, he sees something else, a second figure, blurred, moving along the edge of the lot. Then it's gone. He calls Mason. In 1998, this was nothing, he says over video chat, sharing his screen. Today, I can at least tell you this. She was not alone in that parking lot. Another car was there. Someone was walking along the perimeter. Whether that matters, that's your job. Mason watches the loop, jaw tight. The obvious theory snaps into place. If that car belongs to Daniel, if that figure is him, then this is where their paths cross outside the shop, where harmless test drives and waves at the pumps turn into something else. But another possibility hangs in the air like static. What if it isn't him? What if there was someone else out there that night, someone who never showed up on any witness list, someone who sat in the dark, engine idling, watching her routine, waiting for the right second? What if the glitch wasn't an accident? It's almost too much conspiracy even for him, but cold cases breed that kind of thinking. Every detail is suspect. Every gap feels intentional. We still have the original hardware? He asks. The old recorder? We have the housing, the analyst says. Guts were replaced years ago. You're not going to get a smoking gun that says tampered, but you have more than you had yesterday. More is something. More is also dangerous. It can distract as easily as it can clarify. They add a new photo to the board in Fern Creek. A still frame from the enhanced footage, blown up, printed, lines traced around the ghost car and the blurred figure. Underneath, in thick black pen, unknown vehicle, unknown person. The case that was supposed to be narrowing widens again. On the desert search grid, the day heat finally breaks. For weeks, crews have been out under a white sky, sweat soaking through vests, boots grinding sand into finer sand. The desert is a brutal archivist. It either preserves or erases, nothing in between. Bones can lie untouched for years, but so can the empty space where someone was never buried at all. Then, on a cloudy afternoon, a storm rolls in from the distance, dark line on the horizon, wind picking up, biting cooler than anyone remembers in months. "Wrap it up," a supervisor yells, scanning the clouds. "We don't need anyone caught in a flash flood." The team starts marking their last coordinates, calling in dogs, packing up equipment. One of the handlers tugs at a retriever's harness, but the dog resists, nose slammed into a patch of scrub by a shallow gully. "Come on, Cooper," the handler mutters. "We're out." The dog whines, digs, not frantic but purposeful. The handler's instincts, trained and tested, flare. "Hold up," he calls. "Give me a minute." He kneels, scraping away brittle plants, fingers combing through compacted soil. At first he sees nothing, just more dirt, more rocks. Then his nail hits something that isn't rock, something smoother. He pushes aside more earth. A curve emerges, pale, hard, too even to be stone. He freezes. "Supervisor," he yells. "Here, now." They mark the spot, tape it off. Radios crackle. The storm rumbles closer, but no one moves. They know what happens if a flood comes through here. Evidence scatters, surfaces, disappears. Mason arrives with Reyes, breath quick from the drive and the climb. The techs have already started a careful, methodical excavation, layer by layer, inch by inch. A small bone, then another, then fabric, degraded but still clinging to the idea of what it used to be. A zipper tooth, a button. Dirt fills the air, fine and dry, mixing with the heavy smell of rain. Someone produces an old photo from a file, a bracelet on Emily's wrist, simple chain, single charm, tiny silver star. They find a scrap of metal in the dirt. The tech lifts it gently with tweezers, washes just enough grit away with a mist bottle to see the shape. A star, bent, tarnished. "Bag it," Mason says, voice rough. By the time the storm hits, they've recovered enough to know what they're standing over is not a random dump site. A body was here. A girl was here. For years, the desert held her in its indifferent embrace while the world above argued about suspects and theories and ratings. News travels faster than the rain. By that evening, the headline crawls across screens nationwide. Remains believed to be Nevada cold case victim Emily Carter found in Desert Wash. Breakthrough discovery all but closes 1998 disappearance. In Fern Creek, the phones ring again. The sheriff holds another brief press conference, this one with his voice strained but steadier. "We have located human remains and personal items consistent with those of Emily Carter," he says. "We are proceeding with forensic confirmation, but we have notified the family. This is a significant development." The word significant feels offensively small for what it means. For the Carters, it means the nightmare has a ground zero now. A place, coordinates, vaguely marked X on a map where they can imagine their daughter's last moments, instead of letting their minds scatter her across every mile of Route 17. For prosecutors, it means a stronger case. No longer no body, no longer entirely theoretical. Now they can talk about burial, about concealment, about the specific cruelty of leaving a family with hope when you know the truth is already in the ground. For the town, it means something else. Finality, horrible, necessary. But even as anchors talk about closure with renewed confidence, even as experts say the words "case all but solved," the investigation is busy asking new questions. The shallow depth of the grave, the location relative to known paths, the presence of objects that don't match Emily's belongings, the angle of bones that suggest movement after burial, animal or human. Someone put her there. The desert kept her secret. Now that the earth has given up one answer, it raises a darker possibility that creeps under every other detail, like a shadow spreading. If this spot stayed hidden for 25 years, how many more secrets can the desert still be holding? And how many of them belong to the man sitting in a cell swearing to anyone who will listen that he didn't do this, that the truth everyone is so hungry for is pointed at the wrong person? The morgue is colder than the desert ever was, not in temperature, in intention. Down there, under humming lights and stainless steel fixtures, everything is stripped of story. No headlines, no speculation, just bone, tissue, trace, and the blunt arithmetic of injury. The pathologist assigned to Emily's remains has seen more than enough of death. He's long past the point of being spooked. But cold cases carry a different kind of weight, the weight of other people's decades. He can feel it in the way the detective stands straighter than usual, in the way the photographer moves slower, in the way Mason watches every motion like he's afraid to blink. The bones lie arranged on a metal table, cleaned, labeled, ordered, human, female, young. They're not supposed to say she until they're sure, until dental records and DNA and measurements all point in the same direction. But everyone in the room is already saying it in their heads. Emily. The pathologist speaks in calm, precise sentences, his voice recorded, each word destined for transcripts and reports and, eventually, a courtroom. No obvious perimortem fractures to the long bones, he says. Skull shows a fine linear fracture on the left temporal region. Could be from a blow, could be due to postmortem pressure, will need further analysis. He moves to the ribs, tracing a gloved finger over faint marks. Several ribs show slight bending consistent with compression, he continues. Difficult to time. Could be trauma. Could be from burial. There is evidence of animal activity on the extremities. Rodent gnawing, insect damage, scavenging can complicate interpretation. It's clinical, neutral, but then he gets to the neck, or what's left of it. Hyoid bone, small, fragile, easy to miss, and in many cases like this, it's gone. Here, half of it is still there. He holds it up, tilting it under the light. Note the fracture, he says. Anterolateral. This pattern is consistent. He pauses, choosing the word carefully. With manual strangulation or ligature compression. Temporal placement is difficult, but likelihood of perimortem injury is high. In plain language, something squeezed her throat until it broke. Mason's jaw tightens. Reyes writes faster. So cause of death? She asks. Formally, the pathologist replies, I will say, homicidal violence involving neck compression in the setting of other undetermined factors. Informally, someone killed her. This wasn't a fall. This wasn't an accident. Someone put hands or something around her neck and did not stop. He moves on to the small bag of artifacts recovered from the shallow grave. The bracelet, bent star charm, fibers from degraded clothing, some matching what she was last seen wearing, some that don't, faint synthetic strands that look more like upholstery or rope. So what does this tell us? Reyes asks, voice low. The pathologist shrugs slightly. That she died by force, he says. That she was buried quickly without deep excavation. That she stayed where she was put, and that the desert took its time giving her back. Later, in the war room, the cause of death summary goes up on the board like another headline. Strangulation, homicide, no accident, it's what everyone suspected for 25 years. But seeing it in black and white changes the tone of everything that follows. There's no more room for ran away, no more space for maybe she got lost, maybe something else happened. The bones close that loophole. For the prosecution, it sharpens the blade. They sit in a conference room under buzz lights, the lead prosecutor at one end of the table, Mason and Reyes on one side, lab people on the other. Folders everywhere, screens glowing with timelines and image stills and maps. We have a narrative now, the prosecutor says. We can walk a jury from that gas station to that shoulder to that grave, step by step. She didn't vanish. She was taken, restrained, transported, killed, dumped, covered, and the one person we can tie physically to her car is Daniel Hayes. He taps the list on the table as he talks. DNA on the seatbelt, employment records, the work order with his initials, the test drive, witness memory that places a car similar to his in the neighborhood, his proximity to the burial site back then. Now we have cause of death and a location. This is about as strong as a no-body case gets, with a body. Mason doesn't smile, because for every point on that list, there's a qualifier in his head. DNA, yes, but with a plausible innocent explanation. Work order, yes, but from months before, not the night of. Witness, yes, but decades of memory contamination. Proximity, yes, but a lot of people drove those roads. He sees the gaps. He also sees the jury forms, blank and waiting. Talk to me about Lisa Merrow, the prosecutor says suddenly, switching lanes. If we can show pattern, even just a hint at it, that changes the weight of everything. Reyes pulls a thin folder closer. The 2000 case. Similarities, she says. Young woman, late shift, car found by the road, no obvious struggle, missing, they never found her. No body, different county, different jurisdiction. Hayes can't be ruled out as having been in the area that year. We're still chasing down employment overlaps. Differences, the prosecutor asks. No DNA, she says. No physical tie to him. No confirmed sighting, just echo. Echo can be powerful, he says, but it can also blow up in our face if the defense frames it as us grasping at straws. We mention it, we better have enough to survive a relevance challenge. Right now you don't, Mason says quietly. They both look at him. He's not trying to sabotage the case. He wants it solved more than anyone, but he's been a cop long enough to know that wanting is the enemy of proof. We chase Lisa, he continues. We keep looking, but if we try to drag her into Emily's trial without real connective tissue, we hand the defense a hammer. They'll say we're turning one tragedy into a catch-all for every unsolved case within 100 miles. The prosecutor nods slowly. Focus, he says. We tell one story well, not 10 stories badly. For now, we build Emily's case. If the Morrow connection firms up, we revisit. In a cell that smells of disinfectant and stale air, Daniel hears about the remains on a television mounted too high to see clearly. He catches the words confirmed, family notified, closure before the sound cuts to a commercial. The other inmates barely glance up. Old crimes, new crimes, crimes in other states. It all blends together behind bars. For him, it doesn't. He sits there staring at the blankened screen, feeling something sink through him. Not relief, not exactly horror. Something heavier, the finality of a body. He can no longer say, maybe she's alive somewhere. Not even as a desperate, stupid hope. The narrative window that included kidnapped, maybe escaped, maybe living under another name, is nailed shut. His lawyer brings the autopsy summary to their next meeting, the way a doctor would bring scan results. Cause of death, he says, sliding the paper over. Homicidal neck compression. Translation, she was strangled. They found her bracelet. They're going to say she died out there in that wash 25 years ago, and someone put her there on purpose. Daniel reads the words. They don't feel like words, they feel like a wall. Do you feel anything? The lawyer asks suddenly. Not as a trap, as a human. He looks up, eyes red-rimmed. I feel like I'm about to go on trial for something I didn't do, Daniel says. And they finally found proof that something evil happened. And instead of looking at the whole picture, they're pinning it all on the guy whose DNA is easiest to explain. You understand they will use that anger against you, the lawyer says. They're going to say, look at him. Look at how he reacts. Look at how defensive he is. We need control. We need calm. Daniel leans back, laughs without humor. Calm, he repeats. They arrested me in front of my kids. My wife can't go to the store without people staring. I'm watching my entire life rot from the inside out, and you want calm. I want you not to help them convict you, the lawyer says. The state offers him a deal 2 months later, 2nd degree, eligibility for parole after a long, heavy block of years. In exchange, a plea, no trial, no testimony, no cross-examination of their experts, no chance to stand in front of 12 strangers and say the one sentence he's rehearsed in his head every night. I didn't do this. The prosecutor frames it in the language of mercy. For the family, he says. They've suffered for decades. A plea would spare them the spectacle. It would give them peace. Peace. Another headline word. The lawyer lays out the numbers for Daniel in the visiting room. If you take this, he says, you will be an old man when you get out. If you get out, but you will get that chance. If we go to trial and lose, you might never walk out again. You have to understand the risk. So either I admit to something I didn't do, Daniel says slowly, or I roll the dice and spend the rest of my life in here if 12 strangers decide the story makes sense. That's the math, the lawyer replies. He thinks about his kids, about graduations he'll miss either way, weddings, grandchildren. He thinks about his wife's eyes the last time he saw her in the courtroom gallery full of a pain that didn't have a name yet. He also thinks about the word that will follow his name in every file, every article, every future search result if he signs. Guilty. Do you believe me? He asks suddenly. The lawyer blinks. What? Do you believe me? Daniel repeats. You, not the state, not the jury, not the reporters. You've heard my story. You've seen the evidence. Do you believe I didn't kill her? Lawyers are trained not to answer that. It doesn't matter, legally. The job is the job. Guilt or innocence is a jury's business, but he's human first. I believe, he says slowly, that the state can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt what happened in that car and on that road 25 years ago, not the way they want to. I believe their case hangs on narrative and inference and one piece of hard science that isn't as clean as they'll pretend it is. I believe you have a shot. That's not what I asked, Daniel says. The lawyer doesn't answer. Silence stretches between them. In Fern Creek, the Carters are asked a different kind of question, not by lawyers, by a victim advocate. There's a possibility, she says gently, sitting in their living room where the wallpaper hasn't changed since the 90s, that the case resolves without a full trial, with a plea. If that happens, you won't see every detail argued. You won't have to sit through cross-examination. You won't have to hear your daughter's name pulled apart by people who never knew her. Emily's mother looks at the starched pamphlet the advocate placed on the coffee table. Understanding the court process, like grief, can be bullet-pointed. Would that mean he admits what he did? She asks. Yes, the advocate says. There would be a formal admission, a record. And if he doesn't, her husband asks, if he fights it, then there will be a trial, she says. It will be long. It will be hard. And at the end, there will be a verdict that may or may not match what you feel in your hearts. Emily's father stares at the window, at the reflection of the old missing poster still tucked into the frame after all these years, the edges brittle. I just want the truth, he says. The advocate doesn't say what she knows. That truth in court is often a negotiated version with sharp edges sanded down to fit inside legal definitions. Jury selection becomes its own spectacle. They summon dozens of people to a courthouse that has already seen more cameras in 1 year than in the previous 10 combined. Prospective jurors sit in rows, clutching summons papers, glancing at each other, at the hallway where they caught a glimpse of Daniel being led past in cuffs. The judge and the attorneys ask the questions they have to ask. Have you heard of this case? Have you discussed it online? Do you listen to true crime podcasts? Do you believe DNA evidence is always conclusive? Can you set aside what you've seen in the media and decide based only on the evidence presented here? Hands go up. People talk about news segments they watched, episodes they binged, social media threads they scrolled through late at night. Some swear they can be fair. Some admit they already feel like they know the story. More than a few mention the phrase that has been glued to this case since the headline broke. Nevada 1998 cold case solved, as if the answer is already there, prepackaged, ready to be accepted. Mason watches from the side of the room. He sees the way some people look at Daniel, with disgust, with curiosity, with something approaching pity. He wonders how many of them are seeing a person, and how many are just seeing the villain they've grown comfortable with over months of coverage. He thinks about the unknown car in that gas station footage, the blurred figure, the way one mystery can nest inside another like a set of dark dolls, each layer hiding something smaller, harder, more dangerous. When he goes home at night, he sits at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and the case file still open in front of him, even when he's supposed to be off duty. His wife watches him from the doorway. You got what you wanted, she says softly. You got a suspect. You found her. You're going to trial. Why do you look like that? Like what? He asks. Like you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop, she says. He rubs a hand over his face. Because I know something now, he says. Something I didn't understand when I was younger. What's that? That solving a case on paper and solving it in your bones are two different things, he says. On paper, this thing is tight enough. In my bones, there's still that one question that won't shut up. Which is? He looks up at her, eyes tired. If Daniel Hayes didn't do this, he says, who did? And how far are we about to go down the wrong road before we admit it? And if he did do it, what went so wrong in all of us that we let him live right next to everyone for 25 years and never saw the shadow for what it was? She has no answer, because there isn't one that fits neatly in a report. Outside, the town feels the pressure building, even if they can't name it. Storefront conversations drop to a murmur when court dates are mentioned. Parents add an extra "text me when you get there" to their kids' routines, even though the threat that took Emily all those years ago is either long gone or sitting in a cell. The desert waits where it always has, indifferent to trials and headlines and plea bargains. Somewhere out there, not far from the wash where they found her, there are still places no one has walked in years. Arroyos, old fence lines, dry wells. Spots where a car could pull off in the dark, idle with its lights off, watch, wait, then leave. The road where Emily disappeared is still open. Cars still drive it every day. Hazard lights still blink on shoulders for mundane reasons. Overheating engines, flat tires, kids needing a bathroom break. Every time someone passes mile marker 42 now, they glance at the side of the road just for a second, as if expecting to see something there. A shape, a memory, a ghost. The case, according to files and calendars and schedules, is closer than ever to resolution. But in the spaces between the official story and the unanswered questions, in the gap between what can be proven and what can only be guessed, something restless is still moving, still asking, still whispering under every newscast and every quiet conversation. Is this justice? Or just the best version of it we can manage, 25 years too late, with pieces missing and the desert holding secrets no one has found? Yet. The trial starts like a storm you've seen coming for weeks. Everyone pretends to be surprised when the first thunderclap hits, but they've been watching the radar, counting the days, feeling the air change. Outside the courthouse, the crowd is bigger than anyone in Fern Creek remembers. News vans with telescoping masts, satellite dishes aimed at the sky, reporters rehearsing stand-ups, protesters with homemade signs, some saying "Justice for Emily," others saying "Question the DNA," as if the molecule itself is on the stand. Inside, it's colder. The courtroom fills in layers. First the lawyers in dark suits and tight expressions, then the deputies, then the family. Carter's on one side, Hayes' wife slipping into a back row like she's sneaking into a movie she's not sure she wants to see. Then the public, filtered through security wands and metal detectors, breathless in the hush. Finally the jury. 12 people who never asked to carry this weight. 12 people who swore, one by one, that they could set aside the podcast, the headlines, the whispers at the office. 12 people whose names will not be printed, but whose faces are already being memorized. Daniel takes his place at the defense table. No jumpsuit today. A wrinkled button-down, borrowed tie, hair neater than it was in his booking photo. Still cuffed at the ankles, but the chain is hidden. He stares straight ahead, jaw clenched. His lawyer leans in, murmurs something. He nods once without really hearing. At the prosecution table, neat stacks of files, tabs in bright colors, a printed photo of Emily, a different one from the one on the missing posters, propped up against a binder, visible only if you're close. In it, she's laughing at something off camera, eyes half closed, mid-moment. Alive. The judge enters. The room stands. Wood creaks. Hearts thump. The trial of State v. Hayes is officially underway. Opening statements are the first blows in a fight everyone's been shadowboxing for months. The prosecutor stands, button jacket, posture straight. His voice is measured, carrying just enough gravity to fill the room without shouting. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he begins, this case is about a promise broken. The promise every parent makes to themselves when they send their child out into the world, that they'll come home. In July of 1998, Emily Carter did everything right. She finished her shift, she got in her car, she drove a familiar route. But she never came home. Her car was found abandoned on the side of Route 17. Her purse, her phone, her wallet, all inside. She was gone. For 25 years, her family lived in limbo. Until now. He walks them through the story like they've never heard it before. The gas station, the glitchy tape, the abandoned Honda on the shoulder, blinkers still ticking, the long years of nothing, then the box pulled from storage. The seatbelt swab, the DNA hit, the name Daniel Hayes. He holds up the work order from the auto shop. You will see evidence that this man had access to Emily Carter's car, he says, that he drove it, that his DNA was found on the very seatbelt she would have worn that night. You will hear from experts who will explain that DNA doesn't magically appear. It doesn't drift on the wind. It gets there because someone was there. He does not mention the other cold case. He does not need to. The implication hums just beyond the edges of his words. You will also hear how, decades later, Emily's remains were found in a shallow grave in the desert, a short drive from where her car was abandoned. You will hear from a medical examiner who will tell you she died by strangulation, not accident, not misadventure, homicide. He stops, looks at each juror in turn. At the end of this trial, he says, we will ask you to do what the desert could not. We will ask you to bring Emily Carter home by holding the man who took her accountable. We will ask you for a verdict of guilty. He sits. The defense attorney stands, slower, less theatrical. He buttons his jacket, adjusts his glasses, glances once at Daniel, once at the jury. Everything you just heard is a story, he says, a powerful one, a tragic one, a story 25 years in the making. But in this room, in this moment, your job is not to be moved by a story. Your job is to ask, what can we actually prove? He walks to the center of the courtroom, unarmed except for the thin file in his hand. The state will tell you that DNA is destiny, he says, that because Mr. Hayes' DNA was found on a seatbelt in a car he once test drove as part of his job, he must be a killer. They will ask you to jump from he touched this car once to he strangled this young woman and buried her in the desert. And they will ask you to skip over everything in between. No eyewitness, no confession, no weapon, no record of violence, no direct link between him and that wash where her bones were found. He lets that hang. 25 years, he continues. Think about that. 25 years of fading memories, lost records, changed landscapes, broken chains of custody, missing context. The state wants you to believe that one piece of evidence, taken out of that messy, complicated timeline, tells you everything. It doesn't. He nods toward the Carters, doesn't shy away. Make no mistake, he says. What happened to Emily Carter is horrific. She deserved better from the person who did this, and she deserved better from the system that failed to solve her case for so long. But justice delayed does not mean justice can be shortcutted. You are not here to fix 25 years of pain by convicting the easiest target. You are here to decide whether the state has eliminated reasonable doubt We believe they have not. At the end of this trial, when you look at all of the gaps, all of the assumptions, all of the missing pieces, we will ask you to say the only thing the law allows when doubt remains. He looks each juror in the eye. Not guilty. The stage is set. The state calls its first witness, the trucker who found Emily's car. He's older now, hair thinner, belly thicker. He swears to tell the truth, settles into the witness chair with the stiffness of someone about to retell the worst thing they've ever stumbled into. He describes the night in simple, unadorned terms. The heat, the empty highway, the flash of blinkers in the dark. I pulled over, he says. Thought someone might need help. No one inside, door a little open, headlights low, spooked me, called it in. Did you see anyone nearby? The prosecutor asks. No, he says, just that car in the road. Did it look like there had been a crash, a struggle? He shakes his head. Looked wrong, he says, but not busted up, just left. The defense doesn't cross-examine long. There's not much to hit. He's a messenger, not an architect. Next comes the original responding officer, now retired, pulled out of a quieter life to sit under fluorescent lights again. He walks them through the scene in more detail. No sign of blood, he says. No obvious footprints. Purse on the seat, phone, wallet, cash still in it, nothing taken. The prosecutor leads him to the emotional edge. How unusual was that in your experience? He asks. The officer exhales. It's not what you see in a robbery, he says. It's like someone hit pause on her life and walked away with her. Again, the defense keeps it short. You didn't see Mr. Hayes that night, the lawyer says. No. You didn't identify any suspect at the scene. No, he admits. We didn't have much to go on. The lab tech comes next. White coat, glasses. A careful, almost professor-like tone as she explains DNA in terms the jury can grasp without a science degree. She talks about the old sample from the seatbelt, how storage and modern amplification turned what was once insufficient into usable, how they generated a profile, how that profile hit on Daniel's 21st century sample like two fingerprints layered. This is his DNA, she says, gesturing to a printout of peaks and valleys. On that seatbelt. The prosecutor smiles without smiling. And how likely is it, he asks, that this match belongs to someone other than the defendant? She gives the number. It's big, astronomical, 1 in millions, 1 in billions. The kind of number that makes jurors' heads tilt, that anchors sentences like the DNA doesn't lie. The defense stands, smooths his tie. DNA tells us that Mr. Hayes had contact with that seatbelt, he says. Does it tell us when? No, she admits. DNA does not come with a timestamp. Does it tell us how long his skin cells might remain there? It depends on many factors, she says. Material, environment, disturbance, days, weeks, potentially longer in some conditions. If Mr. Hayes drove that car as a mechanic months before Emily disappeared, he presses, and buckled that seatbelt, would that explain his DNA being there? It is a plausible scenario, she concedes. Yes. But your test cannot distinguish between that innocent contact and any alleged contact on the night of her disappearance. That's correct, she says. The jurors write notes. The word plausible hangs in the air like a smaller, softer version of reasonable. The medical examiner testifies too. He uses the term homicidal neck compression. The prosecutor translates strangulation. He points at diagrams, at x-rays of a hyoid bone fractured in a way that almost never happens outside of deliberate force. Could this have been caused by a fall, the prosecutor asks. Highly unlikely, he says. The defense doesn't fight that. He doesn't suggest she tripped into her own grave. Some facts are too solid to spin. Can you tell us, he asks instead, how long she lay in that wash before she was buried? The doctor shakes his head. The desert is not a precise archivist, he says. There is evidence she was exposed to the elements and to scavengers for some time before burial. But I cannot give you an exact timeline. Can you tell us if she died in that wash or elsewhere? The lawyer asks. No, he says. I can say she was buried there. I cannot say that is where she took her last breath. Brick by brick, the state builds its wall. The work order with Daniel's initials. The old shop manager, hands trembling as he confirms. Yeah, that's his handwriting. He liked test drives. The map overlay showing the shop, the gas station, the shoulder of Route 17, the wash, distances measured in miles, narrated like fate. Then they call Rachel. She walks to the stand with the kind of reluctance that isn't about fear of public speaking, but fear of misremembering. She swears in, sits, looks very briefly in Daniel's direction, then away. She tells the jury about being 12, about the car that moved too slowly, about the feeling of being watched, about her father's voice breaking the spell, about the second car at the gas station weeks later and the man with grease on his hands. The prosecutor is careful with her, gentle. When you were shown a photo of Mr. Hayes recently, he asks, what did you feel? I felt a jolt, she says. Like I recognized him, like my brain remembered something my conscious mind hadn't allowed in for a long time. Are you certain he was the man in that car? He asks. No, she says immediately, eyes shining. I'm not certain. I wish I was. I'm telling you what I felt. I'm telling you it's possible. Some jurors nod. They respect the honesty. The defense steps up, voice soft. Ms. Manning, he says, you've listened to podcasts about this case, haven't you? Yes, she says. You've seen Mr. Hayes' image on the news online, he continues. You've heard his name over and over. Yes, she repeats. Is it possible, he asks, that your mind is trying to stitch together that childhood fear with the face you've been shown for months? She exhales a shaky sound. Yes, she says, it's possible. That's why I'm not saying it was him. I'm saying it might have been. The jury watches her, watches him, watches Daniel, who keeps his eyes on the table, jaw locked. When the state finally rests, the courtroom feels thinned out, like too much oxygen has been burned. The judge calls a recess. The jurors file out, instructed not to talk, not to text, not to read. In the hallway, people exhale all at once. Reporters sprint for cameras. Anchors arrange their serious faces. Devastating testimony for the defense, one says. DNA, cause of death, emotional witnesses, another ticks off. Cold case finally being laid to rest, a third concludes. Inside a fluorescent-lit interview room, Daniel's lawyer looks at him across the scratched table. How bad? Daniel asks. The lawyer rubs his temples. They made their case, he says. We knew they would. Now it's our turn. We poke the holes. We show them every maybe they papered over. Will it be enough? Daniel presses. I don't know, the lawyer says, but it's what we've got. The defense calls fewer witnesses. They bring in an independent DNA expert who says words like secondary transfer and persistence and activity level. They try to teach the jury that not all contact is equal, that context matters. Some faces glaze, some frown, some lean forward. Science is compelling until it complicates the story people want. They put an old coworker on the stand who says, Dan wasn't like that. He kept to himself. He got mad sometimes, sure, but not violent. The prosecutor pounces. You weren't with him every minute, he says. No. You didn't follow him on test drives. No. You didn't live in his head, he presses. No, the man admits. I guess I didn't. In a move half the town calls brave and half calls stupid, the defense does not put Daniel on the stand. It's a calculated risk. He wants to testify, wants to stand there and say, I did not kill this girl. But the lawyer has seen too many defendants shredded on cross-examination, their anger and confusion twisted into evidence. They'll drag everything out, the lawyer warns. The bar fight, the anger management, every snapped word your wife ever heard. They'll look at your face and ask the jury, does this look like a man telling the truth? It becomes a vibe check, not an analysis of facts. We can't risk it. So he stays in his chair, silent, present. A man the jury can look at but not question. When both sides rest and the judge reads the instructions, the words are dense, formal, heavy. Presumption of innocence, burden of proof, reasonable doubt, unanimous verdict. Then the lawyers stand one last time to make their closing arguments. The prosecutor leans hard into the word the entire case has been wrapped in from the beginning. Cold case, he says. That's what they called it. Cold because it sat, because evidence gathered dust, because leads dried up. But cold does not mean dead. Evidence can sleep, and when it wakes, it speaks. He points to the photo of Emily, to the printout of the DNA profile, to the autopsy diagram, to the work order, to the map. Each of these pieces by itself might not be enough, he says. But you must look at them together. A young woman disappears. Her car is found abandoned. The only foreign DNA in her driver's seat belongs to a mechanic who test drove her car, who lived nearby, who took long drives on these very roads. Her body is found years later in a place he could easily reach. This is not coincidence. This is not unlucky transfer. This is a pattern. This is a story that ends in one place. Guilty. The defense steps into the same space, facing the same 12 faces. You are being told a story about inevitability, he says, about how everything points in one direction. But let me ask you something. Where is the footage of Mr. Hayes at that gas station? Where is the eyewitness who saw him with Emily that night? Where is the evidence placing him at that wash? All we have is an old work order and a seatbelt he touched once. The rest is narrative. He points to the enhanced still from the gas station tape. You saw this, he says. An unknown car, an unknown figure, a glitch we still don't understand. You heard about another missing woman along another highway, whispers of a possible connection the state is happy to let hang in the air without owning it. You heard from a witness who bravely admitted the limits of her own memory. If, after all of that, you are sitting there thinking, I'm not sure, that is reasonable doubt. The law does not ask for cosmic certainty. It asks you not to destroy a man's life unless you are firmly convinced. Are you? He looks at them one by one. Take the headlines out of your mind, he says quietly. Take out solved, closure, cold case cracked. All of that is noise. All that matters is this. Has the state proven, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Daniel Hayes is the one who strangled Emily Carter and put her in that grave? If the answer in your heart is anything but yes, your duty is clear. The jury files out. 12 lives suddenly cut off from phones, from TV, from the roar outside. The door to the deliberation room closes with a soft, final thud. In the courtroom, time stretches. The Carters sit together, hands clasped, eyes fixed on a spot where their daughter is not. The Hayes family sits apart, smaller, quieter, carrying a different kind of dread. Reporters loiter in the hallway, eyes on the clock, ready to sprint back to their cameras the moment someone says, "We have a verdict." In the war room, the board is still up. Emily's photo, Daniel's, the map, the unknown car, the desert wash, the words solved written in marker on a printout of the press release, underlined 3 times, half as a declaration, half as a dare. Mason stands in front of it, coffee gone cold in his hand, listening to the building breathe. Inside that one upstairs room, 12 strangers are lining up facts against feelings, numbers against gut, narrative against doubt. Outside, the town holds its breath. Nevada, 1998. A cold case finally brought into heat. Now it all comes down to a knock on a courtroom door, a folded piece of paper, and a single word that will echo through Fern Creek for years, no matter which way it falls.